On the morning I turned 10, my father did not take me to a party. He walked me out to a storage shed behind the house, and there, with the whole family watching, he told me what I was. Roland said he was disappointed. I had awakened no affinity for lightning, none for water, none for fire. Nothing a noble son was supposed to carry. All I had was stonecraft, the power to make and shape magic stones. And to him, that was the lowest gift a house like ours could be cursed with. My mother, Eliza, said she had given birth to something useless. Frederick just laughed. None of them said the other thing. The thing I could feel in the room like heat off a stove. Every coin that fed House Ashford, every stone we sold to the nobles and to the crown, came out of my hands. They were laughing at the one talent that kept them rich. To repay the cost of raising me, my father said, I would make stones now without end. The shed was my room. I said I understood, because I did. Frederick took me to the sparring grounds for what he called a lesson. There was one blow. I was on the ground before I understood it had landed, and he stood over me smiling, telling a watching servant this was how the weak were trained. Then he brought up the accident, the day when I was 6, that I hurt him badly by something none of us ever understood. He had never forgiven it. Neither of us knew how I had done it. The family healer patched the mark afterward, quick and cold, and never once looked me in the eye. That night, I finished my count and carried the stones toward Alfred for delivery, the way I did every night. Passing the living room, I heard my parents talking about me, and I stopped. They meant to keep me a slave for the rest of my life. They would never call me family. My mother said, at the very least, she would recover what I had cost them. I had told myself for years that if I made enough stones, worked hard enough, my father would look up one day and see a son. Standing in that hallway, I finally understood he never would. Something in me broke, and then, very quietly, it hardened. I set the stones down and walked out into the cold. The wind pushed at me. I put my hand flat against the outer wall, the wall built to keep everything of theirs safely inside, and I called the stone up. It came the way it always came for me, easy and sure. A rung pushed out under my palm, then another above it, and another, gray stone climbing the face of the wall in the dark. A ladder growing out of the very thing they swore was worthless. I climbed it. At the top, I looked back once at the house that had never been mine, then dropped down the far side into the night. I was 10 years old, alone, and terrified, but I made myself a promise as my feet hit the street. Never again would I be owned. I spent my last coins on magic trains, riding until the platform names stopped meaning anything, and stepped off somewhere with no name. An old man met me there and said the kingdom had forgotten this place. No aid, no trade, only ruined houses, and people too hungry to raise them. He pointed out a girl my own age, gray-haired and sleepy-eyed, fighting a rusted saw against a broken wall, Nora. She didn't look up when I offered to help, only when the saw snapped in her hands. So I made her a new one, pulled from Bladestone. She set it to the wood, and those sleepy eyes went wide. "What is that?" she whispered. "Keep it." I shaped her a hammer next, and nails, before she could say she had nothing to pay with. The villagers gathered, murmuring they hadn't seen a maker's magic in years. I watched her haul beams no grown man could lift, reinforcement magic in a frame too slight to hold it. By dusk, I had decided. The kingdom had done nothing for these people, so I would. The old man said it had once been a mining town, rich with stones, before the world decided only raw power mattered and left places like this defenseless. Starving, Nora and I climbed into the mountains to hunt. I shaped a pair of claws from Bladestone for her hands. Hunter wolves came at us. She cut 2 down in a single swing and tore deeper into the pack faster than I could follow. Then, the brush exploded. A burst boar, huge, low, already at a full charge, bore straight down on her, and she couldn't get clear. "Leo!" I slammed a hard stone wall up out of the ground in front of her. The boar hit it full force and stopped dead, stunned against a barrier built to shrug off siege fire. Before it could shake loose, I pulled a spear from thruststone above it and drove it down. One breath, it was finished. The mountain went quiet. Nora stared at me across enough meat to feed the whole village and asked, low and flat, why I was strong. She asked again, like she couldn't set it down. Everyone I had ever known called this magic worthless. Standing there, I decided to make it the thing that saved lives. Nora never got her answer. She carried the boar down like it weighed nothing, and the starving village crowded around it. They had no firestones, only dented pots. So I made what was missing out of thin air, a knife, a pot with with a cool handle, a small firestone. Nora cooked, and the whole village ate together, some laughing, some weeping. She brought me my share and asked twice how it was. "It's good," I said, and then I was crying, and I couldn't have told you why. A hot meal that wanted nothing from me had no place in anything I remembered. The hard bread, the salt soup, the beatings, a father who looked at me like a stain on his house. Here, on a chipped plate, I couldn't stop. I meant to build my own house, then saw a woman hauling buckets up from the river, and it could wait. I went door to door instead, fitting water stones and sea stones into every home, water that circulated and cleaned itself, so no one hauled water again. Firestones gave each house a hot bath. A man gripped my hands, speechless. A woman laughed and told me to share the first one. I went red and left. Nora had built me a house while I wasn't looking. Living room, kitchen, bath, and bedroom, raised by her hands alone. She lay down on the bedroom floor to make plain she was staying too. I fussed about whether it was proper. She didn't move, so I let it be. The useless rocks everyone had laughed at were keeping a dying village warm. I was going to make them save it. I was 3 days gone before the house I had left even noticed the floor had dropped out from under it. I was not there to see it, but I knew that house the way you know an old scar. And later, piece by piece, I learned exactly how it came apart. They looked for me first. Roland put hired mages on it, men who could track a scent through a city, and they walked the streets for 2 days and turned up nothing. No trail, no witness. A boy with nothing had simply stopped existing between one night and the next. Frederick was the one who worked out how. He knew what my hands could do better than anyone because he had spent years telling me it was worthless. A stone ladder against a wall, a skill they had called lowly, used to climb straight out of their reach. I would have paid to see his face when he understood that the tool had let itself out. That was when the two of them started arguing about the investment. Those were the words they used: investment, cost. The books they had bought me, the years of training in stones poured into a thing that had now walked off. Not a son, a ledger entry that had failed to pay out. Eliza sat through it cold and certain that this was somehow being done to them. Neither of them said the true thing, not yet. They were still angry, which is easy, and had not arrived at afraid, which is harder. Then, Alfred came in with the ledger, and the room got quiet. The butler had carried a lot of unpleasant news into that study over the years, and he had a way of standing very straight when he did it, as if posture could hold the walls up. He told them the order stood: 6,000 magic stones, sold and promised, on the books with the family name against them. And one of those orders, he said this part last, the way you save the worst, belonged to the king himself, a personal commission from the crown, due before the season was out. I have tried to imagine the moment that number landed, because it is the moment the whole thing turned. 6,000 stones. The family that made its wealth and its name on magic stones could not, that afternoon, produce a single genuine one. Every stone that had ever left that house with the Ashford mark on it had come out of my hands in a cold shed. They had sold my work as their craft for years and never once learned to do it, because learning it would have meant admitting a slave's skill was worth studying. Now the slave was gone, and the king was waiting. Roland did not break. I will give him that much, and only that. The man had been a commander once, feared enough on a battlefield to earn a beast's byname, and he reached for the commander's answer. He refused to lose. He ordered them to gather stones, any stones, scrape together whatever could be bought or found, dress them up, and deliver them as Ashford work. Fake the whole order and dare anyone to say otherwise. Frederick told him it would not work. My brother was arrogant and cruel, and a great many things I have no kind words for, but he was not stupid, and he saw the cliff. He said the king had held true Ashford stones in his own hands, had used them, knew the weight and the shine, and the way they held their charge. A man like that would know a fake on sight, in a heartbeat, and the day he knew it was the day the house ended. Passing off forgeries to the crown was not a gamble. It was a confession with a delay on it. Roland would not hear it. "Find the boy," he said, "or fill the order." Those were the only two doors he would let anyone open, and he did not seem to notice that he had shut the first one himself on a 10th birthday when he handed a child to a shed and called it property. So the house mobilized. Every resource it had turned toward two impossible tasks at once: hunting a boy who had vanished and faking a king's order that could not be faked. They set that machine running that afternoon, and somewhere out past the edge of the map they did not think to check. That machine was going to keep running for a long time, and one day it was going to arrive at my door. I did not know any of that yet. On the day they started coming apart, I was in a field, learning how to hold a hoe. The old man had told me the rest of the village's story by then. Stonehaven, that was its name, and once it had earned it. a mining town, prosperous, digging magic stones out of the hills and selling them to the whole region, back when the hills still had anything to give. Then the veins ran dry, the kingdom forgot the place existed, and the town emptied out around a chief who now led almost no one. He told it without much grief. A man can make peace with being the caretaker of a joke. The little farm plot could never feed even the few who were left, so I told him I wanted to make it bigger. He liked the idea and worried about it in the same breath. Good thought, but who is left to work it? I did not have a good answer for the who. I had Nora and I had stones, and I decided that would have to be enough. I made the tools: a hoe, a spade, a blade for cutting sod, shaped clean out of stone the way I shaped everything now. Nora took a hoe and threw herself at the ground like it had insulted her. I have watched her do impossible things since, and I still think about that afternoon. She broke hard-packed soil at a speed that did not look real, the hoe rising and falling faster than my eye wanted to follow, whole rows opening behind her while I was still lining up my first swing. Her reinforcement magic, the thing her family had thrown her away for calling useless, turned a thin, gray-haired girl into something that could outdig a work crew. I joined in and was immediately humiliatingly bad at it. My back hurt. My swings glanced. I was a boy who had spent his life making stones in a shed, not swinging iron in a field, and it showed. Nora stopped. She came over, looked at me the way you look at something slightly broken, and without a word, she moved my hands on the handle, kicked my feet a little wider, tilted my shoulders. Then she stepped back. Amateur, she said. She stayed and watched the next swing anyway, and she was right. The work stopped fighting me. The hoe bit where I meant it to. She had fixed the whole thing in about 4 seconds, and then insulted me, and somehow both halves of that were kind. We worked until the light went long and gold. By evening, the plot was several times the size it had been that morning. Dark rows of it waiting for seed, and the two of us were filthy and sore and quietly pleased with ourselves. We went to wash before dinner. That too was a thing my stones had made. A real bath, hot water standing ready, steam in the air, soap cooked down from wild herbs Nora had found in the woods. There was a wall down the middle to divide it. I settled into the heat and felt the day's ache start to let go. I should say what a bath used to be, so you understand what this one was. At the house, a bath was a rationed thing. Once a week, 10 minutes, cold going colder, and gratitude expected for the privilege. Here it was every evening, hot, and no one counted the minutes. I noticed that. I had gotten very good at noticing small mercies because I got so few of them. Nora's voice came through the wall, which was strange because Nora almost never started talking. She asked me why I had come here, to the village, out of nowhere, into the steam. I gave her some small answer, and there was a pause, and then she told me the thing she had never told anyone. Her family had called her a defective child. No proper aptitude, no combat affinity, only reinforcement magic, which the world she came from treated as nothing. So they had thrown her out. She said it flat, the way she said everything, a girl reporting the weather. I felt the floor of my stomach drop because I knew that exact word from the inside. Defective, not needed, handed the verdict on your own worth by the people who were supposed to be the last ones ever to hand it to you. They said I wasn't needed, she said, through the wall. I did not think about it. I told her I had been thrown away too, that my family had decided I wasn't wanted, so I left. It was not the whole truth. I did not say the word slave. I could not fit it in my mouth yet, not even for her, not even in the dark where she could not see my face. But it was true enough, and she needed the true part more than she needed the rest. I was told I wasn't needed either, I said. You're sad. I know, but I'm the same as you. The steam went on curling against the wall. She did not answer for a while, and I let her not answer. 2 of us, thrown away by the ones who should have kept us, sitting on either side of a wall in a town nobody wanted. And for the first time since I could remember, I did not feel like the only one of my kind. I carried the small guilt of the half-lie out of that bath with me, but I would carry it. She had needed a brother more than she had needed the whole ugly story, and I could be that before I could be honest. We expanded the fields again after that, and again, until the villagers stopped worrying out loud about winter. This year, they said, no one starves. They said it like a prayer they had forgotten they were allowed to make. Then the herd came through the fences. Rampage bulls. That was what the elder called them once he saw the shapes on the ridge, and he called them village breakers in the same breath. Cattle-shaped monsters, heavy as a cart, that charge in a mass and go through a settlement like a fist through paper. The old rotted fences did not even slow them. They came down into the fields at a full run, a wall of dust and horn aimed straight at everything we had built. I did not think. I threw up a hard stone wall across the front of the charge, and the leaders slammed into it and stopped dead. But the herd was wider than my wall, and several swerved past the ends and kept coming. Nora was already moving. The pale stone claws I had shaped for her were on her hands, and she went low and fast into the gap, and one bull went down and did not get up, and she was already turning for the next before it hit the dirt. I have never seen anything hunt like she hunts. I put the rest down from below, a field of thrust stone spikes, rising up out of the ground under the last of the charge, and then the field was quiet and the herd was finished, clean. No screaming, no mess I want to describe, just a trampled field gone suddenly still, and Nora already walking the carcasses, deciding which were meat and which were materials. I stood there in the churned dirt with my heart going hard, and I looked at the broken fences, and I understood exactly how close we had come to losing all of it. I found the elder and told him I wanted to build a wall, not a fence, a real wall of stone around the whole settlement so that a herd could never again decide our fields on a morning's whim. He hesitated, and I understood why. He was ashamed. 2 children had already fed his village, plumbed its houses, and now one of them was offering to fortify it, and the debt of it sat on him like a stone of its own. He was an old man being saved by kids, and it embarrassed him down to the bone. So I told him the truth, or the shape of it I could say, out loud. I told him this village had saved me, that before I came here, I had been headed for a life where I belonged to someone, where every stone I made was owed to a house that would never once say my name like it was mine. This place took me in and asked for nothing. Building it a wall was not charity. It was the smallest possible repayment on a debt I was glad to owe. My family had built walls to keep me caged. I wanted, just once, to build one that kept people safe. It was the first wall I had ever wanted to make. I did not tell him that part. I just started building. I raised it section by section, all through that day. Hard stone, up out of the ground, fused smooth, a stretch at a time, because my stonecraft can only shape so much at once. And then I have to stop and let the well fill back up before the next stretch. So I built and rested and built again, and the gray line of it climbed and closed around the town hour by hour. Nora wanted to help and did not know how, so she decided her job was water. She brought me a cup, which was thoughtful. Then she brought me another before I had finished the first, which was a lot. Then she kept bringing them every few minutes, faithful as a clock, until I had drunk so much water that I could feel it moving when I walked. I did not tell her to stop. That was the trouble. I have never in my life been good at telling anyone to stop, because for a long time, saying no was a thing that got me hurt, and the reflex does not leave just because the danger does. By dusk, it was done. A full stone wall around the whole of Stonehaven. One gated entrance left in it, closed and solid. The dying village the kingdom had crossed off its maps looked in the last light like a real town, a fortified one with a spine. The villagers came out and stood along it and touched it like they did not quite believe it would still be there in the morning. That night, all that water caught up with me at once, the way it does. I was making trip after trip in the dark, and every time I came back, Nora was waiting outside my door, patient, holding out yet another cup, still absolutely certain that the correct amount of help was more water. She had watched me work all day and decided this was how you love someone, and she was going to keep doing it until I told her otherwise. So finally, I told her otherwise, gently. I explained that a person can only drink so much, that past a certain point, the water starts working against you, and that this, I gestured at the dark, and my own miserable state, was what happened when they didn't. I was not angry. I made sure she could hear that I was not angry. She looked at the cup in her hands and her face fell. "Sorry," she said. "It's all right," I told her, and meant it. "You were trying to help. You did help. You just helped a little past the top." She nodded, very seriously, filing it away. And standing there in the cold with my walls finished and a downcast girl holding an unwanted cup of water, I realized something. I could raise a wall around a whole town in a day, but I had no idea how to tell the person closest to me a simple, kind no. Nora spoke in cups of water because no one had taught her any other language for it, and I flinched away from plain words because someone had taught me that plain words cost blood. I decided that was the next thing to build, not a wall, a way for the two of us to actually talk to each other. It seemed, standing there, like it might be the harder job of the two. And the more I have thought about it since, the more sure I am that it was. The useless rocks everyone had laughed at were a fortress now, but the thing that mattered most that night was smaller than a stone, and I was going to have to learn it the slow way, one honest word at a time. The village kept all its meat in one crumbling store, and the mice always got there first. I found that out the way I found out everything in Stonehaven, by asking and getting more answer than I wanted. They dried what they could and shared the rest out of a leaning shed that smelled of rot, and half of every winter's hunting went green before anyone could eat it. So I decided to build them a cold box. Two, really. A refrigerator on top and a freezer underneath. Nora brought me water while I sketched it in the dirt. She set the cup down, kept her eyes low, and stepped back the way she always did, braced, like she expected a raised hand instead of a thank you. I thanked her. I always thanked her. It hadn't stopped the flinch yet, but I decided it would, one plain word at a time. I need lumber, I told her. 6 lengths, about so long. I marked the air with my hands. She was gone before I finished the sentence, and back before I'd shaped the first stone. Arms full, almost bright with the having something to do of it. The trick was 2 stones. Cold stone for the chill. Strength 1 for the top box. Strength 2 for the bottom, so it froze. Cold-proof stone to line the walls and trap the cold where I put it, instead of letting it bleed out into the room. I could make anything I could picture clearly. Working gears and engines were still past me. A box that held the cold was not. I built the frame with hammer and nails, coated the inside, and set the stones. Nora slid her hand through the freezer door and left it there. That'll hurt if you keep it in, I warned. She kept it in. She wiggled her fingers in the cold like it was a small private miracle and gave me a look that said the risk was hers to take. I let her have it. We loaded the gray wolf and the boar meat into the freezer, the shared vegetables into the fridge, and worked out a way to scratch dates into the shelves so nothing got lost in the back and left to spoil. Then I opened the door and let the village feel it. The cold rolled out into the summer air, and half of them jumped back like I'd cracked open a door onto winter. One man made a sign against sorcery. The elder came forward slow, held his thin hand in the draft, and his face did something complicated. City families keep these, he said quietly. The rich ones. I never thought I'd put my hand in one out here. He looked almost ashamed. Of the wanting, maybe. Or of how little the village had ever been allowed. I explained it. Cold stone, cold-proof lining. No sorcery, just rocks doing what rocks did when I asked them right. The fear went out of them the way it always did once they understood. And what came after was harder to stand in than the fear. They thanked me, over and over, house by house, until I ran out of ways to say it was nothing. One of the older women caught me in a hug I didn't know what to do with. Off to the side, Nora watched with a flat, unhappy stare, arms crossed, saying nothing at all. When the woman let go and moved on, Nora stepped in close to my elbow and stayed there, and I couldn't have told you why. I only noticed she'd done it. My own family had hated this exact magic. Out here, it made an old woman cry into my collar. I still didn't know how to hold either thing, so I just stood in it. Everyone had food now. Nobody had a decent bed. So Nora and I went up the mountain for the makings of proper bedding, wool, and feathers, and about a bowshot up the slope, the brush spat goblins at us. There were only a handful. Nora went through them before I'd finished flinching, and the ones that reached me came apart on my bladestone and stayed down. Done. No lingering. But goblins in the open meant a nest somewhere close, and a nest meant more of them coming, and I filed that away with a cold little knot in my stomach. How do you move like that? I asked her once it was quiet. Trained, she said, and that was the whole answer. We found a woolback grazing, a big placid thing under a coat of thick, blade-turning fur. I clamped a heavy stone collar around its neck to hold it still, sheared the wool off in great gray rolls, and let it go to grow the coat back. No reason to kill a thing I only needed a haircut from. I scraped my arm on a branch, reaching for the wool. Before I could even look at it, Nora leaned in and licked the scratch, and it closed over clean. I made a sound I'm not proud of. Your spit heals small things. She was already walking on, like she hadn't just undone me completely. 2 cockatrices waited near their nest, fast and flightless, poison on beak and claw. I drove a thrust stone up through the nearer one and finished it before it reached us. The other we left alone. Nora showed me the meat was safe and taught me to dress it. We carried wool, feathers, and meat back down the slope between us. The women had an ancient magic sewing machine, older than any of them, a clanking iron thing with a bad temper. They fed it our wool and feathers and started turning out futon covers. Not just for me, for every house in the village. I leaned in too close, curious about the moving parts, reaching to see how the needle drove. A hand slapped mine back. "Keep those away from there," the oldest woman snapped, "before it takes a finger off you." Then she went straight back to her stitching like it was nothing. I stood there with my scolded hand and my face gone hot, and the strangest thing happened. It didn't sting. It landed somewhere under the sting, in a place that had never been used. No one at home had ever cared whether a machine took my finger. No one had ever told me to stand back because I might get hurt. This near stranger had, without even looking up, and it warmed me more than the fire in the hearth. I kept my hands to myself and watched them work, and thought that a bed I could give the whole village was worth more more than any bed I'd ever slept in. I could build the village anything. I still couldn't fight for it. When the rampage bulls came, when the goblins came, it was Nora who did the killing while my stones only held the line. I'd sworn I would never be helpless again, and I'd meant it. And here I was, helpless in every way that used a sword. So I asked her to train me. I shaped myself a light blade stone sword, and I said it plainly, no hedging, because I'd gotten a little better at plainly. Teach me to fight, not just the fights my stones can win, all of them. She looked at me a long moment. Then she picked up a sword of her own. She flattened me, again and again and again. Weak, she said, the first time I hit the dirt. Footwork, your axis. She held her own enhancement magic back to keep it fair, and even so, I never once touched her. For 3 days, she took me apart and named every piece as it fell. My stance, my feet, the line of my spine. And I got up every time until my body flatly refused to. On the 4th morning, I couldn't get out of bed. Every muscle I owned had seized into something harder than anything I'd ever made. I lay there useless, and Nora came and sat by me and worked the ache out of my arms and legs with her hands, slow and patient, saying nothing. Then the door filled with people. The elder came first, and behind him, half the village, and they had their arms full of vegetables, the best of the fields I'd helped them widen. They'd heard I was hurting. They'd walked over to say thank you. The elder eased down beside me. He told me muscle pain like mine used to be common back in the mining days, before magic tools did all the lifting, and that hardly anyone felt it anymore. Then he asked gently why a boy would drive himself to this. I said I wanted to be able to face any kind of trouble, not only the kind my rocks could handle. He was quiet a moment. Then he told me he was ashamed, that a child was bleeding to keep grown people safe, and that whatever I ever needed, this village would find a way to give it. And I broke. I want to be honest about why, because it wasn't the pain. I'd been hurt worse than 3 days of sparring in my life, and never leaked a single tear. It was the vegetables. It was a room full of people who'd come because a boy they barely knew was sore, who'd carried over the best of what little they had for no reason, except that I'd been useful and now I hurt. No one had ever come for me before. In 10 years, not once. At home, I could have lain in that bed until I turned to dust, and the only question anyone would have asked was who'd make the stones now. Here they came with carrots and worry in their faces, and I cried like something inside me had finally been given permission to. Nora didn't say anything about it. She just stayed, somewhere in the middle of it. Worn out from 3 days of beating sense into me, she fell asleep with her hand still around mine. I let her, and I lay there being needed, and let that be enough. The goblins from the mountain had a nest, and a nest left standing only ever grows. So once I could stand again, we went to end it. I was terrified. I won't dress it up. I stood outside their crude wooden wall talking courage into myself, half hypnotizing my own nerves the way I'd learned to as a smaller boy talking himself through worse. And Nora leaned close and murmured into my ear that I could do this. I believed her more than I believed me. There was a lookout on the wall. I took him from a distance with a thrust stone before he could raise the alarm. One strike, done. Then they came, a rush of them, and Nora dropped the front rank before they reached me. I made my first real kill with the blade stone sword. I don't have a clean way to say it. It was fast and it was final, and my hands shook after. One came at my blind side, and Nora ended it before it touched me. You dropped your guard, she told me, not unkindly. I planted my feet the way she'd drilled into me, raised a field of blade stone spikes up out of the ground, and finished 2 at once. A goblin leapt at me, and I took it out of the air with a move she'd taught me by kicking me clear across a clearing until I learned it. The leader was bigger than the rest. Nora ended that one herself, moving through the fight smooth as a dance, and then it was quiet. She looked at me, breathing hard, and said it plainly. You've got talent. Real sword work. Me? All I could do was stare at her. I have talent with a sword? Decent, she said, which from her was a coronation. Something that had been shaking in me since I was small went still. We tore the walls and huts down so nothing could move back in and started home. The village met us at the gate like we'd won a war. Maybe we had, their war, the small ceaseless one against everything that wanted this place dead. They fed us, they fussed over us. The old woman hugged me again, and this time I almost knew what to do with it. Nora stayed at my elbow through all of it, close, quietly guarding something neither of us had a name for. I thought about the boy I'd been not so long ago, making stones in a cold shed for people who counted them, and never once counted me. Those rocks nobody had wanted kept food cold now, and made warm beds, and I was learning to swing a blade over the top of them. I had a cold box, a warm bed, and a sword of my own, and none of it was the thing that had actually changed. The thing that had changed was smaller, and I still couldn't say it out loud. I was needed here. Somebody would come if I was hurt. That was going to take me longer to build than any wall. But I'd started, one plain word at a time, and for the first time I could see the shape of it. Nora found her first. We walked the edge of the settlement most mornings, the two of us, checking the tracks and the tree line the way we always did. Most mornings, there was nothing to find. That morning, there was a woman lying face down in the brush. She was grown, blonde, wrapped in a mage's robe that had gone dark and stiff at the hem. She reeked of drink from a good 6 feet off. For one bad second, I thought she was dead. Then she snored, loud and wet, and I let my breath out. Nora crouched, scooped water from the ditch in her cupped hands, and tipped it into the woman's mouth. Nothing. She did it again. The third handful got a result. The woman came up coughing, spitting, swearing at a sky that had done nothing to her. Then she saw me leaning over her, and she grinned like she'd won a bet. "There he is," she said, "my rescuer." I asked if she was hurt. She waved that off and squinted around at the fields, at the tree line, at the empty land in every direction, and asked where in the world she'd washed up. All she remembered, she told us, was drinking the whole night through at a tavern and buying rounds for strangers. After that, nothing. A clean black hole where the rest should have been. Nora looked at me. I looked at the woman, who was already trying to stand and not managing it. We took her home. She told us her name was Serena, and she said it the way people say a thing they've decided to keep. Inside, she went straight for the fixtures. She ran the tap and watched the water come, opened the cold box, and stuck her face near the chill, and turned in a slow circle, taking the whole house in like it was a puzzle she meant to solve. "Out here," she kept saying. "All the way out here." I gave her my story, most of it. I left out the part with the crest on it, House Ashford, the shed, the count of stones I owed. I told her I could make things out of stone, and when she asked me to show her, I set my hand flat and drew a smooth gray block up out of nothing on the table between us. Serena went quiet, not bored quiet, the other kind, the kind where someone is doing arithmetic behind their eyes. Then she told me my magic was the strongest she'd ever seen. Not one of the strongest, the strongest. She said it plainly, like a fact she was surprised to be handing over for free, out here in the middle of nowhere, to a boy of 10. I didn't know what to do with that. My whole life, people had called this skill worthless with the same flat certainty. I turned the block over in my hands so I wouldn't have to look at her while it landed. She told us her own story to trade for mine. She'd run from her family, she said, because they feared what she could do. Dark magic. Her people were of the light, and to them anything dark was demon work, best cast out before it spread. So they cast her out. Another one of us then, a third stray in a house full of strays. Then she leaned across the table, propped her chin on her hand, and asked me, sweetly, terribly, whether I'd like to go out with her sometime. Nora was between us before I finished blinking. She didn't shove. She just planted herself there, one hand flat against Serena's shoulder, and held her back, and fixed her with a stare so flat and so sticky that even Serena's grin flickered. "No," Nora said. Serena laughed and threw both hands up in surrender, but I caught the thing underneath the laugh. The way she'd read my magic in a single glance. The arithmetic behind the eyes, the drink that didn't slow whatever was running in there. She played the sloppy drunk beautifully. She was not a sloppy drunk. She was something else, wearing one like a coat. The next thing she taught me, I would have sworn was impossible. She said we should build a unit that both heated and cooled, a single machine to hold a room at whatever warmth you liked through the heavy snows that came here in winter. I told her the truth about my stonecraft, the truth that had always capped me. I could only make what I understood. Simple shapes, simple stones, the things I could hold whole in my head. A machine like that lived past my ceiling. "So teach me," she said, and pulled a folded sheet of notepaper and a stub of pen out of her robe like she'd been carrying them the whole time. What followed was not drunk talk. She walked me through the thing piece by piece. The firestone and the cold stone for the two temperatures. The windstone to move the air. The resistant shell so the heat and cold wouldn't cook the housing. The wiring. The little conductive flow stones that carried mana fast and turned dangerous the second you set them wrong. She drew as she talked. She corrected her own drawing. She taught the way a master teaches, patient and exact. And somewhere in the middle of it, my ceiling quietly lifted and I could see the whole machine at once. Nora had fallen asleep against my shoulder by then. Halfway through, still sleeping, she wrapped both arms around one of mine and held on. I eased her down onto the bench without waking her and kept listening. Then I built it. The shell first, drawn up in stone that would take neither the fire's heat nor the cold's bite. The flow stones next, careful, exact, the way she'd warned me. I fit the parts together one by one. No welding, no glue, stone meeting stone the way only I could make it meet. And when the last piece seated, the machine simply was. Serena reached over and switched it to cold. The room cooled. I switched it to warm, and the warmth rolled out to meet the winter that wasn't here yet. Nora woke to the change in the air. She saw the machine, then she saw Serena, and without a word, she reached over and took my hand and held it, watching the older woman the whole time she did. I looked at the thing we'd made and thought a thought I kept to myself. Drunk act and all, this woman was no wanderer. Somewhere out in the world, she was probably famous. And she was teaching me for nothing, in a house at the end of the road. Serena moved in, and the three of us went out to learn the land. We slept in a row now, me in the middle, Nora on one side, Serena on the other, which meant I mostly didn't sleep, because Serena hugged like a bear all night and Nora fought her for the territory. I said as much, bleary, over breakfast. Serena told me to enjoy it while it lasted. Nora told me nothing and glared at her toast. Out past the fields, the country turned wild and empty. Serena wanted to map it, find what was worth having, so we walked. At a river, we met a poison gator, a long crocodile thing with venom in its teeth, its meat useless. The kind of monster you do not wrestle. Serena didn't wrestle it. She spoke two soft words I didn't know, and the thing sagged like its strings were cut, and then it simply stopped. Weak, she called the first spell. Suction, the second. She pulled the life clean out of it without raising her voice, and it was over before I'd finished being afraid. She talked a little about her dark magic as we walked on, and let one word slip, sideways, about her real age, and then smiled at me in a way that dared me to ask. I'd learned enough by then to know a door that wasn't mine to open. I let it be. Farther out, well past the old mine, we found a cave, and Serena read it before we got close. A grand tiger's lair, she said, and her voice lost its lazy edge. A mage killer, not because it beat magic, but because it beat the delay in it. A spell takes a breath to bloom, and a grand tiger crosses the ground in less than that breath and is on you before the light leaves your hands. She started laying out how we'd take it carefully. Nora didn't wait for careful. She was already moving. She went into the dark alone, low and fast, and I heard one sound come out of that cave and then nothing else. When she walked back out, the grand tiger did not. One strike. She'd ended a mage killer in a single strike, and she came back into the amber light, dusting off her stone claws with a small, proud noise in her throat, like a cat that had caught something and wanted you to know. Serena stood very still. I'd never seen her still before. She looked at Nora the way she'd first looked at my magic. The arithmetic running, the grin gone. Then she asked Nora a careful question. Was she a singular mage? Nora stopped dusting her claws. Serena explained it gently, for both of us. A singular mage is born with an aptitude for one thing and one thing only. No range, no versatility. Nothing a proper mage is supposed to have. To most families, that reads as a defect, a dead branch on the line. But that single aptitude in the rare ones comes in so overwhelmingly strong that it eats the delay, eats the odds, eats a mage killer whole. Enhancement was Nora's one thing. She had no others. She'd never needed them. Nora's eyes filled up. I understood it then, all at once, in a way that went straight down to the floor of me. This was why. This was the shape of the thing they'd thrown away, the same shape as mine. Her family had bred a prodigy and looked at her and seen a broken tool, exactly the way a house had looked at me and seen the same. She'd carried the word defective since before she could argue with it, and it had been a gift the whole time. Serena didn't make her explain. She crossed the ground and gathered Nora in and told her she didn't have to say a single word, that the two of them already knew what she was, and what she was rare. Nora made small broken sounds against her shoulder and didn't fight the arms around her. I stood there with the heat behind my own eyes and kept my mouth shut because there wasn't a plain word big enough for it, and some things you just stand next to. We went home slower than we'd come. The wound had a name now. It turned out to be a good one. Then we built roads. We'd found things worth reaching. A grove of sunfruit trees off to one side, pink and white fruit that sold sweet, sour, and deer at any market. A meadow thick with medicinal herbs, and a clear lake full of fish that nobody had ever bothered to name. All of it hours off on foot through monster country. So Nora and I dug the ground level, and I drew up hard stone blocks, and we laid a road. And then the whole village came out and laid it with us, and the work flew. Serena ran the rest without ever once looking like she was working. She had the village women bringing lunches out to the road crews on a schedule, the logistics tidy behind her lazy grin, and she hunted whatever came at us off the tree line, so the diggers never had to stop. A monster or two tried the road. It did not go well for them, and the digging never slowed. The Grove Road took half a month, even so, and I walled and gated it against anything that came sniffing. The Herb Road went faster, 10 days. Another wall, another gate. The Lake Road ran a full month through the roughest ground. When the last block seeded, the settlement had reached it had never had in its dying years. 3 roads, 3 walled prizes. A lake I still refuse to name after myself. In under 2 months, a place the kingdom had written off had roads running out of it like spokes. The village threw a celebration for it, lanterns and cloth banners, and more food than the old store had held all last winter. I got carried away. I grabbed both of Nora's hands in mine, right there in the square, too happy to think, and told her to look what we'd done. She went red to the ears and yanked her hands back and called me an idiot in the one flustered word she could get out, and didn't quite manage to look sorry she'd let me hold them. Serena watched the whole thing over the rim of her cup and asked loudly whether we shouldn't just make it official on such a happy occasion. The village women swatted her from 3 directions at once, laughing, and she waved it off as a joke. I laughed too. I was needed here, and everyone I loved was in one lantern-lit square, and for one night, the world was exactly the size of Stonehaven. It wasn't. Far away, on the same day or near it, my name was cracking a house in half, and I didn't feel a thing. I wasn't in that hall. I built the picture of it later, piece by piece, from what reached me. This is the shape it took. House Ashford owed the king 6,000 magic stones. They had promised them, and the day came to deliver them, and the family had not one true stone to their name, because the only one who had ever made a true Ashford stone was a boy they'd branded worthless and worked in a shed, and that boy was gone. They had searched. They hadn't found me. So my father did the one thing left to a proud man with nothing real to give. He bought ordinary stones from somewhere else and dressed them up as ours. On the way in, my brother said out loud what everyone must have been thinking, that this was thin, that it might not hold. My father waved it off the way he waved off everything. The fakes were flawless from any angle, he told him. Weather the audience, and all that remained was to drag the stonemaker back home. The butler and the servants carried the chests into the hall. Alfred set them down before the throne, and the family presented 6,000 stones to the crown as promised, and stood back with the good posture that noble houses are made of. The king and queen came down to look. The princess came with them, Melinda, the one betrothed to my brother, the whole point of the alliance. For a moment it seemed to go well. The queen remarked that the stones looked quite fine. Then the king picked one up and the room changed. He had held a real Ashford stone before. Years ago, in his own hands, he had turned one of mine over and learned by feel what the genuine article was. This was not that. He said so plainly. The light at its center was wrong. A true stone carried a clear, transparent depth, and these were dull and clouded through the middle. The power he sensed off it was not the power that should be there. He asked the family, without any heat at all, whether they had truly believed they could pass a forgery under his eyes, and then he stopped. Mid-thought, the summaries would have said, he trailed off as though the memory of the real stone held something he couldn't quite name, something past mere quality, and he set it down slowly and did not finish the sentence. My father tried to talk. He said, in effect, that the crown itself had always ordered its stones from the Ashfords, that they had only ever wished to meet the king's expectations. My brother stammered somewhere in there too. It landed on nothing. There is no angle from which fraud before the throne looks like loyalty, and the king let the silence do the work. The princess broke it. She said she couldn't judge a stone herself, but that she had never once dreamed the Ashford name would stoop to this, and she would not have so filthy a man anywhere near the palace again. She ended the engagement standing up, in open court, in front of everyone the alliance had been built to impress. Just like that, the marriage that was going to lift the house was gone. The king ordered them out of his hall. He did not pass sentence. He warned them instead that a house which forged its tribute to the crown might well find its title forfeit, and left the blade hanging there, unfallen, for them to carry home. Here is the part I keep. My brother was dragged out of that hall in disgrace, his marriage broken, his name split open in front of the whole court, and every step of the way he cursed me. In his head, I was garbage, a traitor, the one who'd run out on his duty and pulled the house down behind him. He never once saw his own hand in it. Not the shed, not the count, not the 10 years. He walked out of the ruin they'd built on my back and blamed the back. They'd stood on me the whole time and never known they were standing on anything. The day I left, their fortune had no floor under it. It had just taken this long to fall, and it hadn't finished falling. No barony stripped yet, no ruling handed down, only a lie cracked open in the light, and a court that would never trust the name again, and a warning left swinging. The debt was out in the open now. It was nowhere near paid. I didn't know any of it that night. I was in a lantern-lit square at the end of a new road, holding a girl's hands for the length of a heartbeat before she called me an idiot, needed and safe and happy. The two stories were bending toward each other in the dark. Neither of us had felt it yet. I didn't feel my name breaking a house in half. It was already happening, days of riding away, and I knew none of it. it. What reached me that morning was Serena leaning in my doorway with a list of things she wanted me to make. A fat cylinder of demon-breaking stone, a length of thin, hollow pipe. She wouldn't say what they were for, and I'd stopped asking. Once I had tried to follow her to find out, and she had stepped sideways into her dark magic and gone, between one blink and the next. So I made her strange parts and left the mystery alone. Then, her voice dropped the tease out of it. "Someone from the settlement came running," she said. "People on the road. Monsters have them." Nora was already at the door. We ran. Half a mile out, the trees opened, and I saw them. 3 people backed against a broken-down cart, and a ring of hunter wolves drawing the circle tighter. A man stood with his arms spread wide in front of a woman and a boy, and there was nothing in his hands worth calling a weapon. I dropped to a knee and pressed my palm flat to the road. Stone came up the way I asked it to, thrust spears breaking out of the ground in a line, catching the nearest wolves as they lunged. The pack scattered. Nora went through what was left before any of it could reach the trees, and she let none of them go. When it went quiet, the road was ours, and the 3 strangers were still standing, still breathing. Serena hadn't moved from the tree line. "You and Nora are something else," she called, plainly enjoying herself. I'd only have gotten in the way. The man came toward us on shaking legs. He was middle-aged, threadbare, his cloak worn to nothing at the hem. He gave his name as Walter, his wife Joan behind him, and their son Toby, a boy about my own age. "Thank you for my wife and my boy," Walter said, and his voice went thin on it. "I didn't think we'd walk out of there." Back at my house, they told it plainly. Walter had been a healer in a town called Aldwick, a small clinic. Him and Joan, honest work and honest prices, their whole living. Then a big treatment center opened its doors down the same street. Well-stocked, well-funded, a bright building with money behind it. People trust a bright building over 2 careful hands. Inside a season, the clinic was dead. They had left to find somewhere new. They couldn't afford a mage escort, and the monsters found them on the road. Walter turned his cup in his fingers and said it like the ruin had been his own doing. "We did everything sincerely," he told me. "It just wasn't enough." I knew that shape. Someone with money and a name had decided these people no longer counted, and the world had simply agreed with him. It was the same machine that had looked at me once and called me a thing to be used. Aldwick and my father's house wore different faces over the exact same rot. "That isn't your fault," I said. "Treat people right, and they should thank you for it, not walk away." Toby watched me the whole time I said it, the way you watch something you mean to remember. I brought them to the village elder. He listened to the whole story with his hands folded, and by the end, his eyes had gone wet. "So no one would lend a hand to a healer who helps people," he murmured. "Hard times." He looked at me and waved off the formality before I could offer it. "If they've nowhere to go, I want them here. My house is small. It's theirs." It was Toby who found the way to make it even. "Dad," he said, tugging his father's sleeve, "what if we worked here? In this settlement?" He turned to me, practical past his years. "If we've got no money, there's no other way to pay it back." Walter straightened. He asked in a voice he had to hold steady if he might serve as the village's healer, a place with no healer at all until that hour. The elder took his hand and shook it, and Walter wept openly, right there by the fire, a grown man undone by being wanted. I didn't say anything. I had already decided, somewhere between the road and that room, that I would build them a house of their own. They told me to rest after the rescue. Instead, I made building materials for the family's house, chosen work, mine to pick up and put down, which after years of the other kind still felt like a gift I hadn't earned. When Joan finally chased me off the site, Toby walked me out along the new road to the herb meadow. He lit up at the rows of it. "You're strong," he said, crouching over the plants. "And, wow, there's even blue herb growing wild out here," he explained as he picked green herb for antidote, yellow for a bad stomach, and blue, the base for mana potions that pour magic back into a spent mage. "I've never used one," I admitted. He looked up at me like I'd said the sky was a color he hadn't heard of. "You're a mage, and you've never touched a mana potion?" He came closer, and something shifted in his face. The healer in him, doing the measuring healers do. He went very still. "That's not right," he said slowly. "Your capacity, and how fast you come back, they're not on the same scale as anyone I've ever read about. How are you even real?" I shrugged. "I recover by eating and sleeping. Is that strange?" He didn't have an answer. He laughed it off and went back to his herbs, and I let it go too. But he had seen something, and I could tell he wasn't going to forget it any more than he'd forget my face. We talked while he gathered. He was bitter under the kindness. The mayor of Aldwick had poured money and loud advertising into that big hospital until the small clinics simply couldn't survive beside it. He started to say what happened to people who got pushed out that way, the roads they ended up on, and I steered him off it before he could finish. Then we sealed the meadow gate behind us and started home. The wolf came out of the trees without warning. This one was different from the ones on the road that morning. It didn't flinch when I cut it, didn't break and run the way a wounded thing should. I shoved Toby behind me and put my sword through its charge, then finished it with a spear of stone before it could gather itself again. Then the road was still, and the boy behind me was unhurt. Toby let out a breath. "You're not hurt?" he asked first, before anything about himself, and I told him that was a good instinct in a healer. Then he looked at the dead thing and his jaw set. "We can't keep getting saved, Leo. Every time. We need weapons of our own." He was right, and I told him I'd raise it with the others. On the walk back, I noticed how much the new road had changed the distances. The meadow half an hour out now, the orchard not much more, the far lake a stretch beyond that. Ground that used to be a day of danger had become a walk. It only made me want the whole of it defended. The clinic went up, and the house beside it, and then they were finished. Walter knelt in front of his own door and couldn't rise. He ran his hand down the frame like he didn't trust it to be solid. "That you'd do all this," he managed, "for us." I asked him then if he would stay for good. "No coin," I said. We couldn't offer coin, but food and a roof for as long as he wanted them, in trade for keeping our people well. He agreed before I finished. The elder came and sealed it with a handshake, and Toby threw his arms around me hard enough to knock the wind out of me. I wanted the whole village safe now, not just healed. That meant weapons and armor for everyone in it, but I had only ever made gear for my own hands, and I had no idea how to fit it to other people's. I asked Serena. She only shrugged and told me that anyone left alive who could teach weapon and armor craft was near impossible to find these days. Days went by with no answer to it. I sat at home stewing over the problem until Nora, without a word, came and quietly started working the knots out of my shoulders. Then Serena put her head in and announced another visitor. Outside the gate stood a knot of weathered men, worn swords, a battered spear or two, dented armor that had seen real use. Their leader stepped up and gave it to me straight. They had been the self-defense militia of a rural town, years of it, until the kingdom posted mages out to replace them and left them with nothing. After that, every other town had turned them away at the gate because they carried no magic. Trained fighters, and not one place in the whole kingdom had a use for men who couldn't cast. I looked at them and felt it land in my chest. Thrown out the moment someone with power decided they no longer counted. The same thing that had happened to Walter. The same thing that had happened to me. Half my town was made of people the strong had discarded. "There's a place for you here," I told them. "If you want it." They roared. They clasped arms in a rough circle and shouted like men handed their lives back. Their leader was Bruno, broad, hot-blooded, proud of the spear on his back, with his second, Harold, at his shoulder, and two more, Darren and Paul, behind them. Serena watched the whole thing with a grin I didn't trust. "Things are about to get a lot more fun around here," she said. And then, to the men, lower and delighted, "You boys might just fly a little too high." I had no idea what she meant, and that was exactly what worried me. The next morning, I started making arms for the guard, with Bruno standing over my shoulder. He was good at it. He sized up each recruit by build and handed out the roles, mostly swords, one spear, one axe. One older man had his heart set on a spear and got a sword instead. "You're a sword," Bruno told him, not unkind. "Your frame can't carry a spear. That's not an insult, it's a fact." The man sighed, said it couldn't be helped, and took the blade. I ran up plain blade and thrust stone weapons for them to drill with, and Bruno marched them out to the yard while I got to the real work. I made Bruno a sword first to learn the shape of it. I drew a blade of hard stone up out of nothing and honed the edge, and then I began stacking, the part no one had ever taught me, the part I'd only guessed at alone. Into the handle, I set a power stone, small as a knuckle, and the blade seemed to lean forward, hungrier. A speed stone beside it, and the weight in my hand went quick and light. Last, a fang stone for the beast things that ran this land, and the edge took on a low, patient hum that meant it wanted them. 3 stones, 3 effects, layered into one weapon, a wind sword, then the armor. Hard stone embedded through the chest piece to turn a slash, a thrust, a blunt blow, but built over a windstone base, so the whole thing stayed featherlight, because a beginner who can't move in his armor is just a slower target. I made it so a man could run in it. For Bruno, I built the spear he'd earned, a thrust and wind head, with power and speed, and guard woven in, the fang effect for the beasts, and a snap of wind laid over the strike itself, so the point arrived before the arm did. I turned it in the light and knew, without pride wanting anything to do with it, that it was the best thing I had ever made. The years I'd spent studying in that cold house had been worth something after all, just not to the people who'd made me do it. I didn't hear Nora arrive. One breath, the shop was empty behind me. The next, she was there at my shoulder, close enough to touch, and I nearly came out of my skin. She could have ended me before I ever turned around. I knew it, and somehow it only made me trust her more. Leo, she said. Then claws. So I made her a new pair. Wing claws, better than the last. Thrust and speed built in. The rate she'd land a killing hit, and the rate she'd turn one aside. And the beastbane over all of it. I fitted them to her hands, pale stone curving past her knuckles, and she flexed them once and went still. Thanks, she said, so quiet I nearly missed it, and her face went pink to the ears, the gratitude clearly running deeper than the gift. Bruno chose that moment to shoulder through the door looking for her. He stopped dead when he saw the spear on the bench. "Oh, is this mine?" He snatched it up, checked the balance, and broke into a grin like a boy on a name day. What a finish. You're a fine mage, kid. He ruffled my hair hard enough to rock my head, laughing. I had walls, roads, healers, and now men who could hold a line. Bruno had already started muttering about what the land beyond the wall was beginning to send at us. Herds that could flatten a fence, something bigger stirring further out. Whatever was coming, and something was always coming, it would not find us with empty hands. Bruno called the break, and Toby and I dropped where we stood. The road behind me had come a long way. Walls, healers, men who could hold a line. But a wall only matters against something that comes for it, and that morning, I still thought the something was a long way off. You two have guts, Bruno said, planting his spear and looking down at us like a man pleased with his own dogs. Toby had thrown himself into the drills the day he watched me finish one, and now he was face down in the dirt beside me, wheezing that I was incredible and he couldn't touch me. I told him to breathe first and worship later. 2 hard sessions a week, Bruno drilled us, and real rest between. Build the body slow, the way mages never bother to. Most magic users treated their own legs like luggage. Bruno treated them like the only weapon that never ran dry. Then he crouched, and his voice dropped under the noise of the others. There was a thing coming, he told me, and it smelled like war. Rogue mages, mages who'd turned bandit, who used their gift as a weapon and pointed it at whoever was weaker on the road. More of them every season. Travelers, merchants, whole families walking with everything they owned on their backs. He'd seen the pattern before a war the way you smell rain before it falls. He said it to me and not the others. And when I asked why, he shrugged like the answer embarrassed him. Because I was the strongest fighter he had. He said he couldn't beat me standing on his head, and he wasn't joking. I sat with that. A year ago, I'd been a thing my family kept in a shed. Now, a captain of men was telling me I was the one he'd put at the front. Behind us, the rest of them ran the morning's mock battles, and the order came out the way it always did. Nora first, she fought Bruno dead, even without so much as touching her reinforcement magic, and that alone should have told anyone what she really was. Then Bruno, then Harold, Darren, and Paul, in that order, each one grinning or grumbling at his place. I looked at the whole shape of it, the wall, the men, the drills, and thought of the rogue mages out there, taking what they wanted because no one had ever stopped them. I thought quietly that with one wrong turn on my own road, that could have been me. I put the thought away where I kept the Ashford name, and I decided to bring Bruno's warning to the one person who thought 3 moves past everyone else. Serena found us before I found her, which was her whole personality in one motion. She came around the wall a little flushed and not entirely steady on her feet, hiding something, the way she was always hiding something, and I'd long since learned not to pull that thread in daylight. I told her what Bruno had told me, the rogue mages, the war smell. She didn't look worried. She looked interested, which on Serena was worse. Waiting was pointless, she said. If the rogue mages were hunting the roads, then the smart move wasn't to bolt the gate and pray. It was to hit them first, hunt the hunters. And here was the part her eyes were already 3 steps into. Every traveler we pulled off that road alive would carry word of us everywhere they went. Stonehaven, the village that stood between bandits and the weak. Traders would come. The kingdom might finally send patrols out this far and remember the place existed. Bruno chewed on it and didn't hate it. Strike first, protect the refugees, and put us on the map doing it. I turned it over. Striking first meant deciding to be violent before anyone had touched us, and I could feel the weight of that. But the roads those rogue mages hunted were the exact roads our people came in on. The healers had come that way. Everyone I'd taken in had walked a road like that, scared, with everything they owned on their backs. Protecting travelers was protecting my own. I said yes. Bruno read the bandits off the land like a book. The refugees were fleeing Aldwick in a steady trickle, and where the frightened went, the wolves followed. He picked the stretch of road they'd hit and set the trap on it. His men dressed down into broken travelers, ragged, easy, worth robbing. On Serena's plan, I went out onto the road in a plain disguise to draw the eye, and I will say exactly one thing about it, which is that it worked and I hated it. We waited. The light went long and gold. Then they came, better than a dozen armed men driving a knot of captured refugees ahead of them like cattle, and at their center, a mage. You could tell by how the others walked around him. That was Victor. Bruno played it perfectly. A shaking old traveler, hands up, begging. The bandits laughed and closed in easy. Then Bruno sprang it. The wind-enhanced weapons I'd forged did what I'd built them to do. His men came out of the ragged clothes fast and hard, and the armed bandits who'd expected sheep met something else entirely. It was over quicker than it takes to tell. The strikes landed, the men went down, and the road belonged to us. The refugees didn't run. They stood in their little knot with their eyes fixed on us, terrified to hope. What Victor did next told me everything about him. One of his own men, beaten and pleading on the ground, reached for his boss and asked for help. Victor made sure that man never asked anyone for anything again. His own, tossed away to prove to the rest that they were all disposable. He did it without changing expression. I did not look long. I didn't need to. Nora shifted at my side, ready to take the mage herself. I put a hand out and stopped her. This one was mine. I walked out to meet him, and Victor looked at me and saw a child. Maybe a girl. He was still smiling. He told me what he was, the way men like that always announce themselves. Lightning was the strongest element, he said, the fastest. Light itself, nothing alive could dodge it. And crushing the weak, he said, was one of the great pleasures the world offered a strong man. He said it as a gift, as if I should be honored to be crushed by something so fine. I answered him plainly, that kind of talent, the born strong kind, I'd never had it. I told him that even so, a person with no talent at all could still help people, and that sooner or later, someone would see it. He laughed at me. I told him I was going to beat him with the very power no one had ever respected. Then he threw his lightning, and I let the ground answer. I pulled the stone up around me first, lightning-proof stone, close as skin, a gray shell rising from the dirt to swallow my body. His spear of lightning came fast as his boast, cracked across me white and blinding, and did nothing. Nothing at all. It broke on the stone and scattered into the evening, and left me standing exactly where I'd been. His smile went. He screamed that I'd angered him now, and he gathered everything he had, his ultimate, the strike he'd built his whole cruel life around, light, bright, and enormous, the kind of thing that ends a fight and a person in the same instant. So I gave it somewhere to go. I raised a single tall stone between us, a lightning rod stone, the old kind people once set on their houses to pull a storm's fury safely into the ground. His strike hit it, and the rod drank the whole thing down. Every scrap of that light poured into the earth and was gone, and the dust came back quiet, and I hadn't moved. He stood there empty-handed, a mage with no magic left, staring at a shell of rock that had eaten the strongest element in the world without so much as cracking. Generate, I said. Heavy stone. It came up out of the ground around his wrists and his ankles. Dense, crushing, heavier than anything he could lift. And the shackles closed with a sound like a door shutting. He went down to his knees under the weight of it. And then the man who crushed the weak for pleasure was begging, calling me little lady, promising anything, pleading for the mercy he'd never once handed out. I didn't gloat. There was nothing in me that wanted to. I just stood in my stone and listened to the shackles hold. And behind me, not one of Bruno's men made a sound. Every person there had, at some point in their lives, been told that what they had was worthless. Nora, thrown away. Bruno, dismissed. Me, kept in a shed. And here on a road in the last light, the useless skill had reached out and caged the strongest thing any of them had ever seen. Nora came up beside me and looked at the shell of stone I was still wearing, and after a moment, she said very quietly that it was cute. I chose to let that go. Bruno finally breathed out. He looked at the shackled mage, then at me, and looked like a man who'd have to rebuild some ideas from the ground up. He left the aftermath to his men. He didn't quite know what to say to me, and for once, he didn't try. We decided to take Victor and his gang to Fairhaven, the nearest real town, and hand them to people with the authority to judge them. Bruno asked if I could undo the shackles when the time came. I told him I could reshape them, but only because I'd made the stone myself. My magic only ever answered to what my own hands had made. He filed that away, the way he filed everything. Nora and Harold took the freed refugees ahead toward the settlement, while Bruno and I kept the prisoners. The refugees stared at me as they went, and one of them murmured something about the brave little girl, and I felt my face go hot before Bruno stepped in and headed it off. I let it go. There was a bigger thing sitting in my chest. Bruno talked with the refugees while we walked, and the story they told him was one I already half knew. Aldwych had a new mayor. He'd raised the taxes past what anyone could carry and let corruption rot the place from the top. And so these people had packed what they could and walked. High walls of law built to squeeze the small until they broke and ran. And I stood there in the dark and understood something I hadn't let myself understand before. House Ashford wasn't a singular evil. It wasn't the one poisoned well in a clean world. It was just one more instance of the same rot, the powerful crushing the small, because no one made them stop. The same machine running in Aldwych, running in 100 towns, running in the family that had thrown me in a shed. Mine had never been the only family like that. It was one rot among many. That was somehow worse, and somehow it steadied me. The refugees had meant to cross the border, but Bruno warned them the border would only turn them back. So I offered them what I had. Come to Stonehaven, I said. It was small, but we helped each other there, and we wanted to make it into something better, and we needed the hands. I said it plainly, no grand promises. We needed cooperation. We wanted to grow. One of the older men blinked at the name. That old mining town? His grandfather had worked it back when it thrived on magic stone. He couldn't believe it was still standing. The children swarmed me then with questions about my magic, and I got shy and lost the thread. But the adults were already talking it over, and by the fire, they agreed to come and see. I looked at them, cooks among them, a carpenter, real skilled hands, and for the first time, I let myself think the word properly. Not a settlement, a town. We'd need more wall, more secured land, more of everything. But it had started right here with people choosing us. The Fairhaven gate guards took one look at what we'd dragged in and couldn't make it fit in their heads. We had Victor, their Victor, a known menace on these roads, a lightning mage with a medium aptitude, and few of their own mages could have stood against him, and we'd brought him in on his knees in a rock. The gate guard stared at me and asked plainly if a child had really done this, because that one was still a child. Bruno put a hand on my shoulder and told them it was Leo who'd overpowered the boss and to just take the thanks. They took Victor away for judgment. Bandits like him drew indefinite labor in the mines, and I thought of the refugees driven like cattle and the man he'd thrown away on the road, and I decided he'd earned exactly what was coming. He ground his teeth and said nothing at all. His pride was gone, and I was sure, walking out of that yard, that I'd never lay eyes on him again. A guard mage at the station thanked us both, Bruno and me by name. Then he asked me the question I'd known was coming, my attribute, my aptitude, how a boy had done what a boy shouldn't be able to do. I hesitated. There was no clean answer. My magic had no attribute anyone knew, and no aptitude tier at all, and I'd learned that the true answer only drew the kind of eyes I didn't want. I told him I made magic stones, and left it there. He watched me for a moment, then let it drop, courteous about it. A shame, he said. Their captain was away on an expedition and would have been delighted to meet me. He told us their town chief was a person of real character, nothing like the mayor rotting Aldwych from the top. And then he said the thing that stayed with me the whole road home. They'd remember our names. I didn't know what to do with praise. I never had. Back home, I hadn't even been trusted to hold my own stone weapons once a fight was over. So the warmth caught me off guard. A light, blooming thing, awkward and new, riding under my ribs the whole way back through the dark to a town that was, for the first time, waiting for us to come home. Somewhere out past all of it, my name had started to travel. I didn't know yet how far it would go, or who at the top of the world would eventually turn his head to hear it. Serena caught me the morning after we came home, before I'd even washed the road off my hands. The whole town already knew about the bandit job, and she wore the grin that meant she was about to make me regret something. She started in on the disguise, on how I'd gone out on that road dressed to draw a robber's eye, and I told her flatly that we were never speaking of it again. She admitted she'd maybe gone a little far, then let it drop. That was as far as I was letting any of it go. What I wanted to talk about was the children. 20 refugees had come up from Aldwych and stayed, and a good handful of them were kids, small, quiet, watching everything the way I used to watch everything, from a corner, braced. I told Serena I didn't want them only fed and roofed. I wanted them somewhere that felt safe, somewhere better than just not dying. She chewed on that, then said the town should build a real children's facility and pull hands from the village to raise it. That's a good idea, I said. It was more than a good idea. It was the thing I'd been circling without a name for it. I brought the plan to the elder, who kept what was left of the old mining town. He heard me out without interrupting, the way he always did, his thin hands folded on his knee. When I finished, he was quiet a moment. Then he told me I was a kind boy, and that the town was his to steward, but the future was mine to build, and I could build whatever the children needed. I didn't know what to do with that either. Praise still landed on me like something I'd have to pay back later, but I had his blessing, and that was all I'd come for. Grady ran the crew. He was a carpenter the road had nearly killed. Bandits had left him for dead before Stonehaven took him in, and he took the work as seriously as I did, which was the highest thing I knew how to say about a man. We built the homes first, I gave each house a spine of stone tuned against a different disaster. Hard stone so nothing could break the frame. Wind stone so no storm could peel the roof. Lightning warding stone. Earth stone braced against the ground shaking. Fire resistant stone against flame. One house. Every catastrophe answered at once. When the refugee families walked into them, the adults stood in the doorways and stared at kitchens and baths, finer than the homes the towns had thrown them out of. A few of them cried. I looked at the floor and told Grady where the next wall went. Then we built the thing the children didn't know about yet. A sealed room set with a floating stone, so that anyone who stepped inside drifted up weightless and hung in the air laughing. And a water slide. A tall one, taller than any kid in the town, fed endlessly from a single water stone so the water never ran dry. Grady kept the specs, and I kept the secret, and Serena, saddled with 60 curtains and 30 blankets, and all the carpets besides, groaned that it was a big job and tried twice to wriggle out of it. Nora quietly planted herself by the exit until the sewing got done. Nora did the hauling nobody else could. She carried loads that should have taken 3 men, set them exactly where I pointed, and came back for more without a word. Grady watched her work for about a week, then told her, half serious, that he'd take her on as his apprentice tomorrow. She looked at him like he'd spoken another language. It should have taken half a year. It took 1 month. Grady said, flat, that a town this size had no business finishing a build this fast. That with a boy who made every material on demand and hands this good, work that should eat seasons 8 weeks instead. He said it like a complaint and thanked me in the same breath. I made the last adjustment to the slide, opened the water stone, and the whole of Stonehaven came out to sea. Serena went down first because of course she did, and came up whooping. The children hung back at the edge, not sure it was allowed, until she waved them in and told them everyone was sliding. In turns, no arguments. Then the dam broke. They swarmed it. They went down screaming with joy and climbed straight back up to do it again, over and over, water flying gold in the low sun. A few of them dared the floating stone room instead and hung up near the ceiling, kicking at nothing, laughing so hard they couldn't get down. I stood off to the side, keeping the flow steady, telling myself I was working. Nora saw through that in about a second. She grabbed my hand and pulled me up the steps with her, and before I could get a word out, we were both going down in a rush of water and noise, and I was laughing, actually laughing, with a dozen kids piled up howling at the bottom. I'd made a lot of things by then. Walls, weapons, wells, whole houses. Standing at the top of that slide, soaked, a small hand tugging me back up for another run, I understood I had never once played in sunlight. Not in my whole life. The village that had been dying when I walked into it was now a place where children shrieked with laughter in the light, and I'd built it, and some of that light was landing on me too. The kids kept coming back to me between runs, tugging my sleeve, wanting to know how the water never stopped and how the room in the middle let them fly. I didn't have good answers. Mostly, I stood there and let them hang off me and tried not to flinch at how easily they trusted it. This stranger who made rocks, who barely 11 and small, could give them a whole afternoon and ask nothing back for it. Where I came from, giving always had a bill attached. It took me a while to believe this one didn't. We played until the sun went down. Then the whole town slept like the dead. I thought that was the shape of things now. I thought the danger was all behind me on some road I'd already walked. Far off, in the life I'd fled, the house that had caged me was about to crack, and the crack was going to come looking for me. I wasn't there for this part. I've stitched it together since, from what traveled up the roads and what I know of my brother, and I tell it the way you tell a thing you watched from very far away, too far to change it. Frederick had been sent back to the Royal Academy in disgrace after the fake stone scandal broke. He walked in expecting the old world, the one where the Ashford name opened every door and every boy in the hall wanted to stand near him. Instead, he found the whole school whispering and stepping wide around him, chairs going empty on either side when he sat, conversations dying when he came close. He couldn't stand it. It wasn't in him to stand it. He bullied the boys who'd once flattered him into greeting him louder, and they did it out of fear, which he mistook for respect. Every day the ground under him thinned a little more, and he answered it the only way he'd ever been taught to, by pushing harder against people smaller than him. Then came a practical combat class. The teacher had everyone under suppression barriers, throttled down to low spells, so no one could get hurt. That was the whole point of the rule. Frederick argued it. He was an extreme rank fire affinity, the rarest tier there was, the one thing about him the family had never stopped bragging on, and he would not be throttled down with lesser boys. The teacher held the line. So my brother, who had never once in his life been told no and made to keep it, lost the last thread he was holding and threw fire at the man. I'll spare the details, because they aren't the point, and because there's nothing in them worth carrying. The strike landed. The teacher was hurt, and a single timid classmate who had spent all week too afraid to speak finally said out loud what everyone was thinking. And then the whole class said it with him, turning on Frederick where he stood. The senior teachers came fast. They didn't deliberate, and they didn't listen to the name. The king had left a standing order after the scandal. Any trouble from the Ashford boy, any at all, and he was gone. There was nothing to argue, so they expelled Frederick on the spot, in front of the whole class that had just turned on him, and the road to becoming a court mage that his entire life had been aimed down, slammed shut, and would never open again for him. He didn't understand it. That's the part I keep coming back to. My brother had spent his whole life certain that birth decided everything, because in his world it always had, right up until it didn't. He stood in that hall and genuinely could not grasp that being born who he was born had not saved him. The same lie our parents built the house on. It was that lie collapsing finally, and it was his own hand that pulled the wall down. I won't pretend I felt nothing hearing it. I felt a cold, complicated kind of satisfaction, the sort that doesn't warm you at all, because the same fall that ruined him was already turning the whole ruined weight of that family in my direction, and I didn't know it yet. The blow didn't stop at Frederick. It rolled downhill and took the whole house with it. My father lost his command of the magic corps. My mother was removed from her seat on the school board. The barony itself, the title, the lands, the offices, everything the crown had ever handed House Ashford was revoked in a single stroke, the way the crown gives such things, and the way it can take them back. The old trade partners heard the name was finished and cut their ties by nightfall. In the span of one boy's temper, the family that had thrown me in a shed for making worthless rocks had nothing left but the walls, and the walls weren't theirs much longer either, ruined. But, and this is the knife's edge of it, not finished. Here is what a house like mine does when it falls. It does not look inward. It does not sit in the wreckage and ask what rot brought it down. It looks for something to take. My father heard a rumor drifting up the same roads my refugees walked. A village out in the borderlands, nameless, where mages were outshining proper nobles. A place growing rich and famous out of nowhere. Its stones and its craft the talk of every road it touched. He fixed on it the way a drowning man fixes on a plank. That village, he decided, would be his road back. He would find it. He would take its secret. He would buy the Ashford name back with whatever it was hiding. My mother didn't break at his side. She schemed at it. Between the two of them, the plan hardened into resolve, and the resolve turned outward toward a village they'd never seen, hunting for a way to make themselves whole again on top of it. I keep thinking about the rumor itself and where it came from. Every family I'd taken in was one more voice on the road, with a story about a boy who made endless stone and turned a dead mining town into somewhere children could live. Every wall I raised, every home I braced against storm and fire, every refugee I fed made the village louder in the world. I had been building a beacon. I'd been building it on purpose, proud of every stone of it, and it was that beacon my father's eye had finally caught, glowing on the far edge of his ruin. Not one soul in that cold room knew the boy at the heart of that village was the son they'd branded useless and thrown away. They couldn't imagine it. It never crossed their minds once, and that blindness is the exact thing that was going to bring them to my gate. And there was more moving under all of it than they knew. High purity magic stones had grown rare across the whole kingdom, the old craft of making them all but lost. So scarce now that even the crown was running short of the one thing a nameless village was somehow producing without end. A ruined family scheming its way up the roads was only the near danger. Further off, quieter. A king who had already once held a fake Ashford stone and known it for a lie was going to start wondering where a real one could still be made. 2 arrows knocked at me from opposite ends of the world, and both of them pointed at the same small town full of laughing children. A hunt was turning toward me from below. Something larger was stirring toward me from above. I was pouring water down a slide and teaching children how to laugh, and I felt none of it yet. But it was coming. Both of them were coming. And the roads I had made so loud were already carrying my name straight to the 2 people in the world I least wanted to ever hear it spoken. A town of 50 mouths eats more in a week than a village of 20 ate in a month. I had done the arithmetic in the shed the way I did everything, 4 numbers at a time, and the answer kept coming back the same. We needed the lake. So Serena, Nora, and I borrowed nets from the old chief and went to fish it. The Great Lake was so wide, the far shore just gave up and turned to haze. The villagers had stopped coming years ago when the monsters got bold. We came anyway. Nora pulled fish out of the water faster than the 3 of us could pack them. I made a cold stone box to hold the catch and keep it from turning, and it filled. And I made another. Serena checked each one. She can see harm as a black haze clinging to a thing, and set the poison-skinned ones aside to be handled with care. By mid-morning, we had boxes stacked like bricks, a town's worth of food. In one morning, out of water, nobody else would touch. Then something took the line and hauled back. It came up out of the shallows wrong. A fish the size of a cart, and then legs. It grew limbs and dragged itself onto the mud, and it came at us. I will keep this short, because the fight was. It spat a blast of water hard enough to break bone. Serena opened a black void in the air and swallowed the blast whole, then laid a string of spells over the thing that sapped the strength out of it and dragged it down. That bought me the half second I needed. I had never shaped stone on a moving target before. I did it then. I put a crushing heavy stone down out of the air, straight onto the monster, and it stopped moving. Just like that. The thing that had haunted the lake for years lay still on the mud. Serena looked at me and told me, plainly, that I was getting stronger. No teasing under it. The praise landed square in the part of me that had been told for 10 years it was worthless. I felt proud. Then I felt embarrassed for feeling proud. Then Nora, jealous of nothing anyone could name, hauled me out of Serena's reach and hugged me hard enough to crack a rib, and I stopped feeling anything but winded. I carried the haul to the old chief, and in among the ordinary fish, he found something that made his eyes go wide. A river eel, rare, poison on the skin, and a delicacy once you grill it right. He cooked it for the whole town, prouder of his fire than of anything, and it was so good it gave me an idea. Farm them, stock a pool, and raise them on purpose. Serena topped my idea with a better one. Around a mouthful she was still complaining about the bones of. Out in the wider kingdom, she said, big clinics and guild mages had put ordinary healers and workers out of their trades, and those people were on the roads right now with nowhere to go. Invite them. Bring the ones who actually know a craft here to a town that wanted them. It was the same rot I had run from every place I had ever lived, the strong crushing the small. So we agreed to clear more forest and raise more homes. That night, I saw Bruno and a handful of the men slip off into the trees, quiet, like they didn't want to be seen. Nora said the word suspicious. Then she said it again. I decided we would follow them. We tracked them by smell, a heady, head-turning odor drifting through the trees to a wooden hut with a chimney breathing that same strange air. I made a little heavy stone step to see in the window. Inside, the men sat easy around cups, tired workers unwinding after a hard day. No plot, no betrayal. Serena caught us spying before I worked out what I was looking at. You could have just knocked, she said, leaning in the doorframe with that lazy grin. It was a still. She had built a distillery out in the woods and been brewing quietly for weeks, and the odd cylindrical parts she'd once asked me to craft, the ones I'd shaped without ever knowing what they were for, were its workings. I apologized for suspecting her. She laughed it off, then told me flat that children didn't get so much as a taste. I had years to wait. I hadn't wanted one. I had come out braced for a betrayal, the way I always brace, and found a woman who had built the town its first small comfort out of parts I made her by accident. Bruno gave a sheepish shrug, caught out and glad of it. I put the suspicion away, a little ashamed of how quickly it had come. Stonehaven hit 55 souls, and to keep it growing, we took to the roads, driving off the bandits who preyed on refugees and bringing the rescued home. Off the main highway, we found a knot of people dragging a sled of everything they owned. They were fleeing Aldwick and its crooked mayor. Their guard was a woman named Marina, brown-skinned, sharp-eyed, a water mage of the rare extreme affinity, and she had walked out of Aldwick after the mayor stole her wages and turned his attention where it wasn't wanted. She told it flat, no self-pity in it. The mayor had sorted everyone without magic into an underclass and barred them from his shops. The same disease, wearing a different town's face. I invited them all to Stonehaven. Serena sold it hard, the baths, the kitchens, the children's facility, even the new brewery, and Marina agreed to come see the lake we kept talking about. That was when the road went cold. Frost bloomed across the road in a breath, ice locking our feet to the ground. 2 mages stepped out with a pack of henchmen behind them, robes marked with the kingdom's own symbol. Rogues who had failed to enter the Royal Mage Corps and wore the colors anyway to pass as the real thing. They called themselves the Crown Pillars. The theatrical one drawled at us. The cold one behind him gave the order, which I will only relay, not repeat: kill everyone but the refugees. I was already quietly making a stone. I didn't need it. Their water mage, Caleb, loosed a spell like a falling waterfall, sure of himself. Marina answered without stepping back. Raw water thrown at a man is no better than thrown dirt, she told him. Real water magic looks like this. Her current came down vastly bigger than his and folded his spell flat, and then she gathered water around his head until he dropped, alive, only unconscious. She wouldn't kill him, she said. He would be judged and put to work. Beside me, Serena laughed and repeated the band's name back at them, already counting the bounty on their heads. The 2 women traded a wink and a thumbs up. A friendship started right there, in the middle of an ambush. Cornered, humiliated, their people down, the 2 leaders played their last card. They gave up their human shapes and became giants. I have to make you see it, because I have never once forgotten it. Kurt rose first, an ice giant, a mountain of blue-white glass that pulled the cold out of the whole road and threw a shadow long enough to swallow all of us. Gunther came up beside him out of the earth itself, a giant of raw gray rock, boulders for fists, so tall, I bent my neck all the way back and still lost his head against the sky. The ground shook when they set their weight down. The air went thin. It was, without any close second, the most awe-inspiring and the most terrifying thing I had ever seen in my life. 2 men becoming something out of a story, blotting out the daylight, looking down at a boy and his friends the way you look at ants you haven't decided how to step on yet. And it didn't matter. Serena walked toward the ice giant like she was strolling up to admire it. She told it, sweetly, that she had never reached a true form so grand herself. And then she loosed her dark magic, a rot she once called a miasma, a decay that eats matter and living things alike. It crawled up the ice giant from the inside. The blue-white glass browned and cracked and sagged, and Kurt came apart out of his own giant and folded to the ground, burned hollow. Gunther faltered at the sight of it. That was all the opening Nora needed. She was already in the air. One flying kick, and the rock giant shattered, a mountain broken by a girl who barely came up to my shoulder, stone raining down off a shape that could no longer hold itself together. I finished it. I reached up into the air over the falling giant, and I made a spear, a colossal piercing stone, longer than a house, and I named it in the half-second before I dropped it, Longinus. It came down through the rock giant and pinned what was left of him to the earth, and I set a second one through his leg to be certain. The giants fell, both of them, and the road went quiet. We bound the 2 of them in hardened stone laced with a weakening enchantment. Reverted to men, they looked small and hollowed out. Serena said a mage who spends his mana all the way to nothing can burn his own body up just staying alive, and these 2 had come close. She explained the rest as we worked, the way she explains everything, like it was obvious. A true form is the final answer a mage gives to their own magic, the pinnacle, the thing only a rare few ever reach. But it is a ceiling, not a door. The shape they take is the last shape they will ever have. The giant is weaker than the man, because the man still had somewhere left to grow. I nodded, like it was only interesting. And underneath, the old cold thought opened up again. I have no element, no affinity, no true form waiting inside me. Not now, not ever. That door is the one door in the whole world that stays shut to me, and it stays shut because of the exact thing my family named me worthless for. Every person I had stood with on that road could become something more than themselves. I never will. I am just the boy who makes rocks, and my rocks had just put down 2 giants. I did not know how to hold both of those in my hands at once, so I picked up the stone shackles, and I carried them, and I said nothing. Serena and I walked the 2 beaten crown pillars all the way to Fairhaven, while Bruno took the refugees home. The town gave us a wide, uneasy berth, 2 children marching a pair of infamous rogue mages in stone shackles down the main street. Gunther muttered the whole way about being brought down by kids. I let it wash past me. At the station, the gate mage matched the pair to his wanted posters and nearly shouted the roof down. Then the guard captain came out. Brandon, broad and practical, and he knew my face. I had handed him a captured bandit once before. He thanked me for that, and then he started asking real questions about Stonehaven. The walls, the water, the food, all of it, I told him, built out of my stones. I watched him decide to take me seriously. He offered to carry word of us to his mayor, which could mean a survey team, a trade road, a town that existed on somebody's map instead of only in rumor. No promises, he warned, but it was a door and it was open. I got openly, embarrassingly excited and told him about the eel farm Marina and I were planning. I let myself hope out loud. I did not think, not once, about what else travels a trade road. A name does. Mine was climbing now, rung by rung, toward exactly the kind of people who would notice a boy who can make flawless stones out of nothing, in a kingdom quietly running short of them. A fresh wave of refugees came in on the strength of the rumor, and Stonehaven passed 102 people. I threw up more homes and ran water into each of them, kitchens, baths, plumbing to rival anything in Fairhaven, while the newcomers sorted out among themselves who would farm, who would fish, who would keep a shop. We kept trading by barter for now. Coin could wait. Then Marina and I built the eel farm for real. Sea stone for the walls because it shrugs off water and rot. Water stones to fill the tank. Wind stones to keep the water breathing. Little chips of heat stone dropped in and pulled back out to hold it just warm enough. She knew the craft and I made whatever the craft needed. And between us, the thing came together like it had always meant to exist. A town that could feed itself. Months before, it had been a dead mining village where an old man counted the winters he had left. We rode out to the lake for breeding stock. Marina dove straight in and told me a real water mage feels every current in the whole body of water at once, the way I feel every stone. We speared eels in the shallows, and on the bank she teased me until my face went hot. And Nora, watching, refusing to be left out, copied her and pinched my cheeks too. Then the water heaved and a stormfin came up, a big electric river beast wrapped in its own living current, the whole lake crackling around it. I did not waste a breath. I planted lightning rod stones along the shore to drink its bolts, and every strike it threw went into the stone instead of into us. Marina met its current with a wall of pure, impurity-free water that carried the charge harmlessly wide, then drove the beast up onto the shore with one heavy blow. Nora raked it. I brought stone fists erupting up out of the ground to hammer it back, and finished it with a field of bladestone spikes driven up from beneath. The result was quick and clean. It turned out to be good eating, close to eel. I asked Marina if we could farm those too. A rich man died trying once, she said, so we would take them only from the wild and only when it was safe. The town could feed 100 people now and defend them. I had built a place that would last, which was exactly the trouble. A place that lasts gets talked about. And far away, the two people I had spent my whole life trying to stop thinking about were following that talk toward me, rung by rung, the same road my good name was climbing. And none of us, not them and not me, knew yet that the road ran both ways. The bounty from the crown pillars came back to me as one heavy purse, and I handed every coin of it back to the town. It became a restaurant for Gordon, an item shop, a general store, and a tavern for Serena. Seed money spread thin across every family with the nerve to try something. A town that could feed itself and pay itself was a town the kingdom could never again quietly forget. The old chief cornered me before the coin was even counted. He wanted to name me deputy chief. I told him I was 11. He said the village had never once cared how old a boy's hands were, only what they had built, and every villager behind him nodded like the matter was already closed. So I said yes. I spent the afternoon walking the shops I had just paid for. Gordon had me taste half his kitchen, cabbage rolls, an egg gratin, a fruit dessert, and when I asked whether he could serve eel too, he grinned and admitted he was already perfecting a secret sauce for exactly that. "Leave the eel to me, deputy chief," he said, thumping a fist against his broad chest. "I ran a fish house by the sea. This one'll put us on the map." The general store was where the afternoon turned. The owner took the high-purity stones I conjured across his counter and went quiet, turning one over and over in the light. He had not held stones this clean in years, he told me. Mined ones were failing all over the kingdom. The good veins run dry, the grade dropping, and cheats had started padding junk stones with pebbles to fake the count, which cracked under load and got people killed. He paid me fair and asked me to bring back as many as I could make. I did not think much of it then. I should have. A whole kingdom running short of the one thing I could make without end was a kingdom that would eventually come looking for the boy who made it. At Serena's tavern, she was in an apron, cleaning, and she poured me a fruit juice so good it startled me. She caught my face and laughed. "What? You thought you'd find me drunk and shirking?" She set a second cup down without being asked. "This place won't be only wine. I keep juice for the ones too short to reach the good bottles." Nora appeared at my elbow with no sound at all, drained her cup in one pull, and fixed Serena with a long, flat stare, while nudging the empty cup back across the bar for more. Fairhaven was sending an inspection team, so Bruno drove the guard into the ground to be ready for it. The morning turned into a tournament, and it did not go the way anyone expected. Nora dropped Harold with a single punch. Harold, the vice captain, the man who had once put down a fire salamander alone. Then she walked up to Bruno himself, traded 2 blows with him, and put the captain in the dirt too. She flashed a small peace sign at the crowd and said, "Victory." My turn went worse. Darren beat me on raw muscle before I had properly set my feet, and I simply did not have the body for it. Bruno hauled me up and told me to stop trying to fight like a swordsman. Serena, from the fence, called out the same thing in fewer words. "Then fight me with your magic," Bruno said, leveling his wind spear. "Your way. Don't hold back to be polite." So I stopped being polite. I raised an auto shield, a slab of hard stone that moved on its own to meet every strike, and let it turn aside everything he had. Then I dropped a heavy jail around him, a cage of the heaviest stone I make, and snapped heavy lock over his wrists, cuffs too heavy for a strong man to lift. He strained once, laughed, and gave up. "I yield," Bruno called, still grinning inside the cage. "No joke, I yield." The old chief was clapping before I had even let him out. The villagers cheered the title official on the spot, right there in the dust. I barely had the word out of the crowd before Nora hauled me back into it and hugged me like she was claiming lost property. And Serena leaned on the fence and told the whole square how very close the two of us were, until everyone was laughing. The warning came from Bruno at dusk. He kept a steady line to Brandon in Fairhaven, and Brandon's runners had brought word up the road. A herd of rampage bulls was grinding straight toward us, around 500 head. 500, Bruno said again, so I would not think I had misheard. "Deputy Chief, it's your call. What do we do?" Marina put a name to it. The Sandstorm Stampede, a rare, massive migration of rampage bulls that came on looking like a moving wall of dust and flattened whole villages under it. The frontier did not count it a monster attack. They counted it a natural disaster. My answer was one sentence. We reinforce the walls, we seal every soul indoors, and we meet it here. So we built. For days I doubled the walls and cut long funneling channels out into the plain, narrow stone races that would take a flood 500 wide and squeeze it into a throat only a few bulls across. I seeded explosive stones along the approach and buried more. Gordon salted and preserved emergency rations. Bruno's militia drilled the battle plan until they could run it in the dark. Nora spent those days throwing herself at my auto shield. She hit it with everything she had, again and again, and dented the hard stone, but she could not break it. On the last evening, she stopped, breathing hard, and looked at the shield with something close to tears. "Strong," she whispered, like the word cost her. She was not talking about herself. The night before the herd came, I found Nora on the wall. Her legs hung over the edge, watching the dark road to the east. I sat down beside her, and then, without deciding to, I told her everything. I told her about House Ashford, about being weighed by my own family the day I was old enough to be tested, found worthless, and handed a number instead of a name, about the shed behind the manor where they shut me to make stones, dust and cold iron, a lamp that guttered, a lock always on the outside of the door, about how they meant to keep me there my whole life, a servant who happened to share their blood, about the promise I made to myself in that shed with no one to hear it, and the night I finally used it to walk out and never look back. Nora did not say anything for a long time. When she moved, it was to pull me into her, hard, the way she always hugged, like she was afraid I would come apart if she was gentle. "Me too," she said, into the top of my head. That was all. 2 words, but I understood every corner of them. She had been thrown away by her own blood, same as me, cast out for being the wrong kind of strong, the way I was cast out for being the wrong kind of weak. Neither of us said anything more. We did not need to. 2 children the world had tried to return to sender, sitting on a wall together, waiting for a storm to arrive. Bruno rang the alarm at first light. The herd broke from the east as a wall of dust taller than the wall we stood on, and under it, the ground began to drum. Then I saw them, 500 rampage bulls, each one heavy as a loaded cart, running shoulder to shoulder in an avalanche of muscle that turned the dawn brown. The frontier had the name right. It did not look like an army, it looked like weather. I lit the buried stones first. The explosive line I had seeded across the approach went off in a rolling chain, and the front rank of the herd vanished into fire and thrown earth and did not come out the other side. The mass behind them did not slow. It could not 500 deep, so I let my walls do the thing I had built them for. The funneling channels caught the flood and crushed it inward, wider to narrower, until the whole disaster was pouring itself into a throat of stone only a handful of bulls across. That was where we killed it. Serena laid a gray weakness over the packed front of the herd, and the bulls in it staggered like their own weight had doubled. Marina swept an arm, and and a driving wave took whole rows off their feet at once, folding them under. Bruno's militia met the ones that reached the wall and held, visibly, impossibly stronger than the dismissed men they had been, Harold's axe and Darren's blade, and a line that did not break. Nora went over the wall and into the throat and put bulls down 2 to a stroke, wading forward without slowing. Marina drowned others where they stood, sealing the breath in them with a fist of clear water. Serena's corrosion collapsed the ones that charged her. I worked the middle. Paralysis stone collars snapped shut around the necks of the lead bulls until they locked mid-run, and a lightning trap I sprang under a whole cluster dropped every animal standing on it in one white flash. The kill zone did exactly what I had drawn it to do, but the tail of the herd was still coming out of the dust, and there were too many, and I could see it in Bruno's face that the line could not hold the throat forever. So I ended it myself. I raised 4 pillars. They came up out of the ground across the whole width of the herd's path. 4 towers of packed explosive stone, taller than any house in the town, standing in the flood like the legs of something enormous. The bulls broke around them and kept coming, hundreds of them still funneling straight between the towers, exactly where I wanted them. I pulled everyone off the field. Clear back, all of you now. And when the last of the militia was behind me, I set off all 4 pillars at once. The world went white, and then it went silent. A wall of light climbed out of the plain, and the sound arrived a half second after it. A single flat thunderclap that I felt in my teeth and in the stone under my feet. The dust wall that had been the sandstorm blew outward and up and simply stopped being a herd. When the air cleared, there was a crater out there wide enough to lose a village in, still smoking at its lip, and nothing moving in it at all. The blast threw me off my feet. Nora was already there. She caught me out of the air and set me down like she had been waiting to. Marina came up beside me, staring past the wall at the hole where 500 monsters had been. Leo, she said slowly, that is a whole different power than the one we talked about. I could only apologize to her. Even I had not known it would be that strong. The wall I had begged this town to let me build, because this place had given me the lifehouse Ashford meant to bury, was the reason there was still a town behind me to protect. And the same craft they had once called worthless, the boy who only makes rocks, had just done to a natural disaster what no man who could turn into a giant had ever managed. I did not have a single second to sit with that, but the village nobody in the kingdom had wanted was still standing, and the disaster was gone. We threw a festival for killing the sandstorm, and the whole town tried to feed me at once. Children pushed snacks into my hands. Nora forked meat at me faster than I could chew, and Serena elbowed straight in to do the same, the two of them turning it into a brief and undignified tug of war over one small boy until I begged off, laughing, with my cheeks full. Then, 3 traveling mages walked into the middle of it, drawn by the rumor, and killed the mood on purpose. I told them plainly what had happened. Over 500 head wiped out at our wall. They refused to believe it. A nameless village led by a child could not have done any such thing. They let everyone within earshot know, and if we wanted them to swallow the story, we could prove it in a duel. All 3 against us. Nora stepped up to my shoulder before I had finished deciding, so we took all 3 at once. They opened first, fire, water, and a hard stone bullet, all 3 at me together. I caught the fire and the water on auto shield, and Nora simply punched the stone bullet out of the air, shattering it against her fist. Then it was over, almost before it started. She dropped 2 of them senseless with a single flurry, and I finished the last with something new I had been practicing. Explosion. A ring of small stones conjured close around him and set off at once, just hard enough to put him down without breaking him. The 3 of them woke up in Toby's clinic, humbled, and left the next morning quieter than they came, carrying the story of Stonehaven's Gate one more town down the road, exactly the opposite of what they had meant to do. Serena, who had taken the celebration to mean she should drink most of a barrel of her own fruit wine, spent that same morning regretting it in a dark corner. Nobody let her forget it. The name spread so far, so fast, that visitors kept arriving with nowhere to sleep. I cleared a stretch of forest and raised a 10-bed inn, reinforced with my stone, and for the first time, real coin began to circle through the town. Merchants bought our farmed eel and begged to buy my cold stones to keep it fresh on the road, because theirs went dead in a day and mine did not. Then, Fairhaven's delegation came, the town chief himself, his leading citizens, Captain Brandon, and a file of their guard mages, and I walked them through everything. I showed them the houses first. That wall is set with wind, fire, and water-resistant stone, I told the town chief, opening a door for him. It holds against a storm, a fire, and a hard rain all the same. Go in and see. They marveled at the kitchens and the baths and the washing machines like men shown a wonder, and Brandon admitted, red-faced, that back home their own water came out of the tap rusty and sputtering. Then flinched and swore to his chief he had not meant it as a complaint. At the eel tanks, the town chief announced he was suddenly starving, so we fed the whole delegation lunch at Gordon's, eel over rice, drowned in the secret sauce he had promised me weeks before. It landed exactly as he had bragged it would. This, the town chief said around a full mouth, is the dish we can't get anymore. Nora materialized at my side halfway through and dug in beside the guests until I quietly reminded her there were officials watching. The afternoon they spent as delighted children. The town chief rode the water slide at the children's grounds over and over, waving Brandon off each time to take another turn. Serena poured her fruit wine at the tavern and laid the charm on so thick I made a note to speak to her about it, and the delegation praised the wine to the rafters anyway. They had already heard, they said, about the 3 mages beaten at our gate. Over a night feast, they pledged real cooperation and swore to improve the road between the 2 towns, to clear its monsters and make it safe to travel. I promised the same back. The forgotten mining village was a partner town now, courted by the very kind of officials my family used to court, and that was exactly the danger in it. A road that was safe to travel ran in both directions. The delegation would go home and tell everyone who mattered about the boy in Stonehaven who made flawless stones without end. And word like that does not stop climbing until it reaches the top. Somewhere down that same road, my ruined family was already moving toward me, following my good name up rung by rung. And past them, past all of them, sat a crown that was running out of the one thing only I could make. None of us knew yet how close to the gate the road had already carried them. Later, I learned what happened in the house that threw me away, and I have told it since the way Alfred told it to me, plainly, because it does not need dressing up. The old butler had served House Ashford since my grandfather's day. On the afternoon the family's world finished falling, he set his resignation down on the table in front of my father and did not look away from it. He was not leaving because the title was gone. He said as much. He told Roland it was the way they had treated their own son that had finally broken something in him he could not mend, that he had watched it for years and swallowed it and could not swallow it one more day. My father nearly struck him. The magic came up in his hand, old reflex, the thing that had always ended arguments in that house. Then it stopped. Even Roland, at the bottom of his ruin, could not make himself put a bolt through the last honest man under his roof. Alfred only straightened his coat. The house I served died a long time ago, he said. You are only the ones still standing in it. Then he walked out through the front doors he had opened 10,000 times, and he did not close them behind him. Roland took his fury out on a staircase railing instead. It did not help. Stripped of the rank, stripped of the core, stripped of the name that had opened every door in the kingdom, he and Frederick sat in the wreck of their pride and reached for the one thing that might buy it back, a feat too big to ignore. They would ride out and slay the Sandstorm Stampede, the great rampage bull herd chewing across the frontier, and the realm would remember House Ashford was still a sword worth fearing. A mage they had sent to hunt for me came back instead with a rumor. The herd was already dead, wiped out, every last bull of it, by the mages of some village nobody could name, a settlement that had risen out of nothing on the eastern road. My father did not hear a warning in that, he heard a target. If some nest of unknown mages was strong enough to break a natural disaster, then breaking them in turn would be the feat that saved the family. So they set out to find that village and measure it, the 3 of them, and a handful of mages still loyal to a dead name. They rode up the same road my good name had been traveling down. They never once guessed the village was mine. The morning it reached me, I was elbow deep in the least dramatic work a person can do. Land grants. Who got which plot on the new Eastern Row? How much timber Grady's crew still needed? Where the next well went? Deputy Chief is mostly paper. I had come to like that about it. Darren knocked and did not come all the way in, which was not like him. There were people at the gate, he said. They had given a name. They were claiming to be my family. I set the pen down. In some cold back room of myself, I had always known the road ran both ways, that a name climbing as fast as mine would eventually be read by the wrong eyes. I just had not thought it would knock so soon. House Ashford, I told him. It was the first time I had ever said it out loud in that town. They used to be my family. They aren't anymore. Darren's face did a complicated thing. He had known me as the boy who made the stones and ran the schedules, and now a great noble house was standing at his gate asking after that boy. To his credit, he only asked whether I wanted them turned away. I couldn't. A deputy chief does not get to refuse the people at his own gate because they frighten him. I stood and reached for my coat. Nora was already in the doorway. She must have heard from the stairs. She told me, flat and certain, that she would protect me, that whatever those people were, they would go through her first. I almost smiled. It's the other way around, I said. I'll protect you. She looked at me a moment with those half-lidded eyes, and something passed between us that did not need saying, because we had already said it once, on a wall, at night. Then we went down to the gate together. They were smaller than the memory of them. That was the first thing. For as long as I could remember, the three of them had stood in my head at the size they'd had when I was small enough to be pronounced worthless. In the daylight at my own gate, they were only three tired people in fine road-stained clothes. My father looked older than I had left him. My mother's hair, always pinned to a knife's edge, had come a little loose, and she had not fixed it. A small wrongness that told me more than her face did. Frederick stood behind them with his jaw set, holding some fury just under the skin. I stopped a few paces off and waited, the way you wait to be told what a thing costs. Then my father crossed the distance, and he reached out, and he laid his hand on my head and stroked my hair, and he smiled at me. I had no memory to set against that, not one. In all the years under his roof, he had never once touched me with kindness, and now his hand moved over my hair like a father in a story, and his mouth made the shape of pride, and he told the whole gathering how splendidly his son had grown. I went cold. Not warm, cold, all the way down. The way you go cold when something is deeply, structurally wrong, and your body knows it before your mind will say the words. A cruel father I had armor for. I had worn that armor my whole life. This I had nothing for. The kindness was a key cut to fit the one lock I had never been able to close, and he was smiling because he thought it would turn. Behind me, I felt Nora go very still. The town had gone quiet around us, and I stood there under my father's gentle hand and understood that House Ashford had not come to my gate to say sorry. They had come because they needed something, and they had brought the one weapon against me they had never bothered to use. The smile held just long enough to say what it had come to say. They wanted me to come home. That was the shape of it, under all the warmth they layered on, how proud they were, how they had always known, how my place was with the family, and the family needed me now. My mother took it up when my father's charm ran thin, telling the crowd what a devoted son I had always been. Every word of it was a hand reaching for the back of my collar. No, I said, just that at first. The one word landed in the quiet like a dropped stone, and I watched the smile on my father's face develop a hairline crack. Then, something in me that had stayed folded flat for years opened all the way up, and I turned my back on them, and I spoke to my town instead. I told them who I was. I told them the boy who made their stones and drew up their land grants had been born the youngest son of that house, and that on my 10th birthday, my father had stood over me and named me worthless and sentenced me to make stones for the family until I died. I told them about the shed, the dust and the cold iron, and the quota that was never finished, only paused. I told them about the night I carried my count up to the house and heard my own parents agree, through a door, to keep me a slave for life and never once call me their son. I told them I had built a ladder out of my own stones and climbed down the wall and run on the birthday that was supposed to be mine, because the family standing so warmly at their gate had thrown me away like a cracked tool and only came looking when the tool turned out to be worth something. I did not raise my voice until the end. When it broke upward. The flat, careful voice I had told the whole story in for years, finally cracking open in front of everyone, because for the first time, there was a whole town standing behind me to hear it and believe it. A slave does not get to say these things. A free man in front of his own people does. For one moment, I will let myself have this one moment. I saw it reach them. I saw my mother's practiced face come apart at the edges as her own cruelty was read back to her in daylight, in front of strangers, by the child she had been so sure would never dare. I saw my father hear the word slave in his son's mouth and understand, too late, that the smile was never going to work. Then I was myself again, and I turned back to face them. "I'm not your son," I told them. "I stopped being that the night you decided I was a thing. You don't get to smile it back." That was when the mask came off for good. My father stopped pretending to be warm. If I would not come willingly, he told the gathering, then they would simply take me. And if this village of mages tried to stop them, who would doubt the head of the Third Corps when he reported a nest of rogues put down? He and my mother and my brother loosed their magic pressure all at once. That wave of presence meant to fold ordinary people to their knees. Nobody knelt. Bruno stood at the front of the crowd with his arms crossed and did not so much as sway. He said something short and rude about men who threatened children, and the town behind him held just as steady. They held because for years I had quietly been making their gear out of my best stones. Every guard, every builder, every child wearing something with a fire-eating stone and a pressure-breaking stone stitched into it, and none of them had ever needed to know why. Now they knew why. It was that the town enduring what was meant to break it that finished Frederick. My brother could stand being refused. He could not stand being ignored. The golden son of House Ashford, the only student the Academy had ever produced who could reach magic true interpretation, would not be shrugged at by scum. So he became the thing he had always threatened to be. His body folded upward into fire and grew, red light pouring off him, until the arrogant flame demon stood where my brother had been, the true form, the strength he had lorded over me every day of my childhood. He loosed his great flame, and the ground before the wall went to glass, and the grass simply stopped existing, and the air itself began to burn, and I let go. I had never done it, not once in my life. There had always been a wall inside me, set there on a sparring ground when I was 6 years old, when I hurt Frederick by accident and was punished so completely that some deep part of me learned it could never, ever raise its power against him again. The family had read that block as weakness and built their whole verdict on it. They had measured a frightened child and written down worthless. The wall broke. It did not break like a dam. It broke like a held breath finally let out. Everything the family had sworn I did not have came up out of me at once. Mana in a quantity that should not have fit inside one small body. So much of it that the wind of its rising staggered the people behind me, and Nora had to plant her feet. Stones lifted off the ground all around me and turned in the air, cold and heavy and waiting. More of them than I had ever dared call at one time. I had grieved quietly that I would never have a true form, that I would never turn into anything the way real mages did, that I was only ever the boy who made rocks. Standing in the ruin of my brother's fire, I finally understood the joke of it. I did not need to become a monster. My stones ate the ones who did. I sent the cold in first, not a fraction of what I held, a fraction of a fraction, because the full cold in those stones would have done something to the whole frontier that does not bear thinking about. It was enough. The great flame met a cold that had no bottom and lost. The fire whitened, slowed, and froze. The flame demons blazed crusting over into ice from the outside in until the roaring stopped, and there was only silence with a frozen fire standing in the middle of it. Then I closed one hand, and the explosive stone I had set in the heart of it went off, and the frozen flame came apart. Not the body, the fire. The blaze shattered like a dropped window, and the demon form fell out of it, spent, back into the shape of my brother, down and finished and no longer burning anyone. The town made no sound for the length of a held breath. Then it made all the sound at once. I did not look at the crowd. I watched my father's face while it changed, and I said the only thing I had for him. Cause and effect, I told him. You taught me that. You just never thought it would come back up the ladder. He tried, even then. Shaken, his voice gone thin, he offered me the thing he was sure every person wanted. Power, a place. The family restored with me at its side. Everything I had been denied handed over at last if I would only come back and be an Ashford again. I told him no a second time. I had not clawed my way out of that house to walk back into it wearing a better coat. Whatever they were, I was not going to become it. My mother recovered first, the way cold people do. If they could not have me and could not frighten the town, they would at least wound what they could reach. And what they reached for was Nora. They knew her. That was the thing I had not seen coming. My father looked at the gray-haired girl standing at my shoulder with her claws out, and a nasty recognition came over his face, and he named her the cast-off daughter of the Fenwick line, a noble house that House Ashford had once looked down on, a girl her own blood had labeled a failure and thrown away. My mother took it up with a thin smile, telling the crowd that of course the discarded boy had found himself a discarded girl, two failures keeping each other warm. I said the only thing that mattered. Nora is the strongest person I know, I told them, and I'll stake my name on that in front of anyone. Nora did not need me to. She had gone very quiet at the word failure. I felt it come off her. The old wound of a house that threw her out for being the wrong kind of strong. Then she stopped being quiet. She told them, in a voice the whole square heard, that she had spent a long time believing people like them, and that she was done, and she moved. For one breath, the two proud Ashfords watched the daughters they would have called defective come at them. The failure of the Fenwick line and the dark magic girl her own family had feared. The exact kind of people their whole world existed to look down on. And I think, in that breath, they finally understood what had been coming up the road toward them all along. Then, the breath was over. Nora crossed the ground faster than my father could set his feet and struck him once, clean, and he went down. In desperation, both of them reached for the last thing they had. Magic true interpretation. The transformations the family had always measured worth by. My mother's shape poured out long and serpentine, a water demon rising in a coil of dark tide. My father came up off the ground remade into a lightning beast, four-legged and crackling, the thunder lion his core had feared. It did not save them. Nora's claws, the ones I sharpened for her every single day, layered to cut through any element there is, went through my father's lightning as if it were paper, and the beast form came apart around the strike and did not reform. Behind her, Serena stopped pretending to be anything less than what she was. She raised a black sphere that opened like a mouth, and it swallowed my mother's tidal wave whole, and then it reached into the water demon and drew the darkness up out of her until there was nothing left holding the shape together. My mother fell back into herself, broken in will, and the fight simply went out of her. At the end, they turned on each other, stripped of every form and every title. My father and my mother stood in the wreck of it and blamed each other in front of everyone. A marriage that turned out to be a contract of money and status, the moment there was no more of either to share. I had spent years imagining what the fall of House Ashford would look like. I had never once imagined it would look this small. I told them it was over, not with my power, with the truth. I said I would see to it that everyone learned what House Ashford had done, that they would answer for it, and that no name and no core was going to bury it this time. I did not have to make it happen alone. Down the road, the same road they had ridden up so sure of themselves, came the answer Alfred had been building since the afternoon he laid his resignation on my father's table. He had not simply walked away. He had gone straight to the mage core, the real one, the kingdom's own body for taking law-breaking mages in hand. And he had spent every day since gathering the proof of what the family had done, the fraud, the assault at the academy, the child they had kept and worked and thrown away. He came through my gate at the head of them, upright and grim in his old servant's coat, and he did not look at Roland and Eliza as people he had once served. He looked at them as evidence. The Corps took them, not a killing, an arrest, hands bound. The head of the Third Corps and the principal of the Royal Academy led away in front of a frontier town that had watched the whole thing and would tell it for years. Alfred stopped in front of me on his way and inclined his head, and said he was only sorry it had taken him so long to be brave. I told him he was the one decent thing that house ever had, and I meant it. There was one more. An old man came in behind the Corps, and it took me a moment to place him. The healer who had tended me when I was small, the one who had left the mansion when he could no longer stand to watch and could no longer help. He was weeping before he reached me. He begged my forgiveness for the child he had not been able to protect. I had the power in my hands to do anything I wanted with any of them. I had beaten a flame demon into the ground and watched two beast forms come apart, and every person in that square would have understood if the boy they threw away had wanted more than an arrest. I gave the old healer my hand instead. I told him a child does not blame the one person who was kind to him for failing to work miracles. I forgave Alfred his years of silence and the healer his leaving, and I let the law take the two who had earned the law. That was the line I had drawn for myself somewhere on the run years ago without knowing I was drawing it. I would see them judged, and I would not become them. Standing there with my town around me and Nora at my side, I found I could hold to it without any effort at all. House Ashford, the house that decided I was worthless, was finished, and I was still exactly the thing I had built with my own two hands. That turned out to be more than they had ever managed to be. Nora took my hand at the top of the street, the way she did every morning, without either of us deciding it first. 2 years had passed since the day my family came to the gate and left in chains. I was 13 now, so was she. The dead village I'd climbed a wall to find was gone, not fallen, grown. Where there had once been a dozen starving people and one broken well, there were hundreds of us, and the well was the smallest thing we had. Running water in every home, a clinic that had eaten Toby's old shed and turned into a real place, with beds and a solid roof and a line at the door most mornings. A farm down on the river where we raised eels by the thousand and sold them 3 towns over until people started making the trip just to eat them here. Nobody called it a nameless settlement anymore. They called it Stonehaven, and they came looking for it on purpose. Past the square, along the water, the children's grounds ran the length of the bank. More than 200 kids I'd built bunks and tables and a slide for went shrieking down the stone chute into the pool and scrambled up the ladder to do it again. They saw me and waved with both arms. I lifted my free hand back. The other one, Nora wasn't giving up. They're staring again, I said. Let them. She didn't slow down. Everyone in town had decided a while ago that the 2 of us were sweethearts. They said it in the market and over the fences, loud enough to be sure we heard. I kept telling them it wasn't like that. Nobody believed me, least of all Nora, who'd quit arguing and just held on tighter every time it came up. She wasn't the girl I'd met in the ruins. That one had barely spoken, watched every door, flinched from a kind word like it might be the front half of a trap. This one walked down the middle of her own town with her chin up and said exactly what she wanted. I liked the change more than I let on. We passed the clinic on the way down. The old healer was on the step with his sleeves rolled, sorting dried herb into a basket for Toby. He was one of 2 men from my old life who'd come looking for me after the house fell. Not to take anything back, only to be near. He'd found a place at Toby's side and hadn't stopped smiling since, like a man let out of somewhere he'd been shut up a long time. Morning, he called, holding up a knuckle of pale root as if it were treasure. A little further on, Alfred stood at the door of the town hall with a ledger balanced on his forearm, checking deliveries against a list. He'd kept a great house running for the better part of 30 years, and now he kept accounts for a town of cast-offs, and he did it like it was the very same honor. He tipped his head to me the exact way he always had. The grain from Fairhaven came 2 sacks short, he said. I've already sent word. It will be put right. I know it will, I told him. Both of them had crossed the whole kingdom to end up here. The house I was born into had thrown me out for making rocks. The people from it who were worth anything had followed the rocks to me. Serena was propped in her tavern doorway when we reached the square, one shoulder against the frame, watching us come with the lazy grin she wore when she'd already decided to make trouble. There they are, she pushed off the wood. The busiest boy in town. Come in and have one drink with me, Leo. 1 cup. You've earned about 1,000. I'm 13, I reminded her. And I'm finally old enough to know that's exactly why not. She laughed, delighted. The laugh she only ever gave someone who told her no. Beside me, Nora's grip tightened until my knuckles ground against each other. I looked down. She was watching Serena with the flat, narrow look she usually kept for things on the mountain that needed killing. We're busy, Nora said. We're on a date. She aimed the word straight at Serena and squeezed again, harder, and I actually winced. I opened my mouth to say it wasn't and thought better of it. 2 years had taught me a few things. Serena stepped down off the porch, reached up, and patted me on the head like I was 6 years old. Look how tall he's getting, she told Nora, thoroughly pleased with herself. Give it a few more years and you'll be the one reaching up. Far from all of that, in a place the sun never reached, my family was breaking stone. The Mage Corps had sent them to the Infinite Mine. It's a warded place, wrapped in a barrier that puts magic out the way. Water puts out a match. Inside it, no spell will light, no affinity answers, no true form ever comes. The greatest fire mage of his year couldn't warm his own hands down there. That was the whole reason they were sent. A house that had built its name on power was put in the one place where power doesn't exist and told to dig. So they dug. My father, who had measured every soul alive by how much magic they carried, swung a pick like any other laborer and was worth exactly what his 2 arms could lift. My mother hauled the same carts as the sort of people she'd once have crossed a road to avoid. My brother, who had never once in his life been ignored, worked among men who wouldn't turn their heads to look at him. The others down there knew who the 3 of them had been. Nobody in a place like that has any love for a fallen noble. They were hated and pushed to the worst of the work and left to themselves in the way that isn't peace. And they turned on one another. Word gets out of a place like that the way it always does. My mother blamed my brother for the fire that had started the fall. My brother blamed her for raising him soft. Both of them blamed the marriage that had made the 3 of them a family in the first place. They had all the years in the world down there to say it, and nothing else to do but say it over and over in the dark. I'd spent my childhood making stones nobody thought were worth anything. They would spend the rest of their lives cutting stone in the one place where the power they were so proud of was worth nothing at all. I didn't feel much when I thought about it. The account was just closed. I was still standing in the square when Serena came back out, and this time, the grin was gone. She had a letter in one hand and something careful in her face. "You'll want to hear this one sober," she said, which, from her, was practically a trumpet blast. She'd had word up the Fairhaven road, and the word was this: the magic stone the rest of the kingdom pulled out of the ground was running thin. The old veins were going quiet. The crown's own supply had started failing, order by order, and someone very high up had finally begun asking a simple question. Where was the good stone coming from? The stone that never ran short. The stone that came from a town on the edge of nowhere that a discarded boy was said to have built out of nothing. She let that sit a second before she said the rest. The king was coming. Not a messenger, not a survey team, not a letter. The king himself meant to ride to Stonehaven and see it with his own eyes, and see the person who made the only true stones left in the whole realm. My first honest thought was that Serena would try to get him into her tavern. "Don't," I said. "I haven't done a single thing," she answered, delighted, which meant she was already halfway through planning it. I looked out at the street. The water ran clean in the channels. The eel farm caught the light down at the river. 200 children I'd made sure nobody would ever throw away chased each other along the bank, and Alfred stood counting his sacks, and the old healer waved a root at a patient on his step. A kingdom had decided once that I was worthless and hardly worth feeding. Now the man who ran that kingdom was getting on a horse to come and find me. Nora bumped her shoulder into mine. Well, I said, "We've got a town to make bigger before he gets here." I took her hand first this time, before she could take mine, and we set off to walk the streets we'd built together and see what else they needed. Whatever the king wanted, he could ask me for it on my own ground. I had my stonecraft and Nora at my side, and a whole town full of people who'd chosen me. Whatever came next would start the day he arrived.